All right, good morning, everybody. If you could please find a seat, we're going to get started here. Got a lot of content to go through this morning. Thanks for being here bright and early with us and enjoying some good Kansas City breakfast and coffee with us here in one of the hidden gems of Kansas City, which is the Linda Hall Library. So let's start by thanking them for hosting us today. Just a beautiful space to have a great conversation. So the conversation we're going to have today is all about our connection, our findings to real estate and producing better outcomes and better buildings for the Kansas City market. This is a program of the Building Energy Exchange of Kansas City, which itself is an initiative of the Climate Action PC nonprofit that he's the primary host here. So Building Energy Exchange of Kansas City is dedicated to advancing energy performance for our regional community and planet, convening experts, providing education and training, and connecting owners to resources and services. The Building Energy Exchange of Kansas City is part of a growing national network of building decarbonization hubs with a goal to demystify energy efficiency, electrification, code compliance, and lots more. And we're working to ensure that local policy and market support are aligned directly with the reality of delivering better buildings in the Kansas City market. So you're in for some great conversation today. I'm going to ask Ryan Evans to come up and give some introductions, and as we bring up Ben Evans to cover our opening remarks.
Thank you. Yes, once again, it's really great to have you here. This is a great venue. I know speaking with a few of you beforehand, even those who are native Kansas Cityans have not had a chance to be in this and explore this space before. So I hope you get a chance to today. I think, as Jeremy said, it truly is one of the hidden gems of Kansas City. We're very thankful to be able to host the event here today. So what should you expect to learn today? Well, for some of you, you participated with us in something called the Building Transformation Forum, which took place last summer in 2024. And Monty, who's sitting up front here, who will be one of our panelists today, gave a presentation that was really powerful about some of the tools that he uses around development. And we wanted to make sure that we brought that back and really this time had that ready to go for a developer audience. And so everything today is really designed around for-profit and non-profit developers. So chances are you either are a developer. I think we had maybe just a little more than 20 developers who had registered for this event, or you're somehow in support of that. You may be a lender, a banker, a designer, an architect, a contractor, an engineer, something along those lines that supports that industry. So we're thankful that you were all here because this is what it's going to take to do development right. So what we're looking to do is to try to find that intersection between doing well, all right, financially speaking, and doing good, and where those things can come together. And given the political headwinds and some of the things that we're up against right now, that's got to be a little bit harder to do, but it's not impossible. So our speakers today are really here to help set the stage for you, to help you understand what it is that you can still do. What are the levers that you can still pull and be able to make your projects pencil? And so we're going to start with a keynote from Ben Evans. Ben joined us last year and was set to join us this year, but as you're aware, things are pretty crazy in Washington. So we're actually going to bring him in like via satellite this time around. And he's going to join us by Zoom here to give us kind of a high-level state of play of what's going on in Washington, D.C., right? Obviously, it's also important what's happening in the state houses and Jefferson City and Topeka as well. But he's going to do that. And then where he leaves off, Abby Massey with Tax Taker is going to be able to pick up later in the program. We've also, along with Abby, have brought in Josh Campbell. He's from Columbia, so he drove over this morning. He's going to talk a little bit about green financing and in particular PACE. And we've got Dana Gordon with TRC Companies who helps with Evergy's programs for incentives. So just to kind of set the stage for ultimately what will become our panel, we've got three different developers. I mentioned Monty earlier, but we've also got Jonathan and Asia who will be joining Monty on stage, and there'll be a moderated conversation around the way that they're doing development, green development in Kansas City. We're trying to find ways to be able to maximize their yield and on their projects, given any and all things that they can take advantage of. So without further ado, because I'm the least important speaker you're going to hear from today, I'm going to get this turned over to Ben, and he's going to get us started. Ben, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jeremy, for having me today, and good to see some friendly faces out there in the crowd. I can actually see most of the way we went. Okay, and I do wish I could be there first. And as Ryan said, I was there last year and really wanted to make great time and wanted to attend again, but my schedule just wouldn't allow us with some of the things going on and what.
But I'm really glad to be able to, chat here virtually, and do want to keep this conversational as much as possible. If folks have questions or comments or something you want to throw out there, feel free to interrupt, or Ryan just ping me, and we can do that as well, and can leave a little time for questions after as well. And I'm going to provide just an overview and sort of set the stage for what's happening in Washington right now around green building and sustainability policy writ large. And I know Ryan mentioned Abby and Monty both particularly are pros at this stuff as well. And I know they will fill in the blanks and add more detail to some of these policy changes that we're seeing, because there is certainly a lot of nuance to these things, and it's a lot to keep up with, sort of the back and forth of what has happened. So I know you all know USGBC. As Ryan said, I lead our federal policy work in Washington. You guys probably know USGBC for LEAD, and I should certainly put in a plug for V5, LEAD V5, which was rolled out earlier this year, and I think it's generating a lot of excitement, a lot of new stuff with this version of LEAD. It's the first, update overhaul of the grading system in a long time, and I think it's exciting to see the reception of that in the market. But USGBC is more than that. We are a mission-based nonprofit, and we do advocacy. Ryan mentioned state and local. We do state and local advocacy work, and we do advocacy work in Washington as well around green building policy. And I work on our federal policy. And we were very involved in the development of the incentives that have ultimately were rolled up into what became known as the Inflation Reduction Act, which was sort of some political labeling around that package. But we were very involved in developing the buildings-related incentives and programs that were in that package, and then also in trying to defend them in the first half of this year. I would say I spent most of my time. If not all, working on how to defend those, and also trying to show real world examples of how those incentives were playing out in the markets and how they were driving activity and investment and job creation and all the other benefits that we know that these things can create. And I would say also that the incentives that we're talking about. These things were far more bipartisan, even just 5 years ago. I mean, we had standalone bills for a lot of these tax incentives that had Republican co-sponsors on them, Republican leaders on them. Not to mention just rank and file Republican support. This stuff was not as divisive as it has become over the past few years, and I think that's something we should talk about how we can get back to sort of depoliticizing these things. But because of that, I think a lot of people, including myself, I've made myself guilty of in Kansas City last year. I was gung-ho that no matter what happened in the election, this was mostly going to continue, and that did not happen. I think I was surprised. A lot of people were surprised to see how far the Congress went in sort of dismantling the IRA repeal, and thought that cooler heads would prevail. You saw the rhetoric early on. It was playing out. You saw Republican leaders talking about using a scalpel to address the IRA and not a sledgehammer. And in the end, I think it's clearly more of a sledgehammer. It's not all gone, and we're going to talk about what's remaining, and there's a lot of good opportunities still left. But a lot of stuff, a lot of really promising incentives that were just starting to build momentum and gain traction in the markets were abruptly cut short, and we'll get into some of that detail. So much more aggressive than expected, and I think what we're seeing is really more of a ramping up of the politicization of energy issues, and I think there's a couple of factors happening there, and first, this was a particularly difficult vote for Republicans. Let's just put that out there. It was, this was President Trump's signature legislative package, was the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed. Just so I don't have to say all those words, and because I disagree with the branding, I'll just call it the OB3 is what we'll call it from here on out. The reconciliation bill that rescinded a lot of these things. It was a very tough vote for Republicans. It put Republicans in a position of either voting against the president's signature legislative package or standing up for clean energy incentives and programs, and that's sort of a tough choice right at the start of a second Trump administration for a lot of Republicans. I think if the vote had happened in isolation, there would have been a lot more. There was already, you saw there were, a couple of dozen Republicans out there pushing hard to maintain this stuff, and and they fought to protect as much as they could. But I think there was a lot more Republicans that if that vote happened in isolation, it would not have been, we wouldn't have gotten the result that we got. We would have gotten a better result. But I think what happened, also a second thing that happened is a lot of Republican hardliners really dug into opposing these incentives for the cost benefit. That bill, as you'll recall, created a lot of deficit. We're talking about trillions of dollars in deficit. And, these clean energy incentives were seen as a pay for it. We're seen as, hey, we can offset some of the cost of all these other things we want to do by repealing these things. And that became a dynamic that was very hard to overcome. And even then, there was a one vote margin in the Senate. We almost got to where we had 3 Republicans vote no in the Senate, and if there had been 4, it would have gone back to the drawing board. So I think that's all just to say. I don't think it's as partisan as it appears necessarily. That said, what we are seeing is these energy issues becoming more a part of the culture wars, much more so than in the past. I think not long ago, you would have energy bills, were very regional. It was all about, there's hydro in the Pacific Northwest, there's nuclear here, there's oil and gas here, there's wind and solar there, and the politics around energy bills was that you would do sort of, all of the above, and you would give incentives and programs for all of those types of energy because they were, there was a lot of consensus that we needed all the energy we could get. We got to, the grid needs it, and for affordability and all the other reasons. And if you look at older energy bills, that's sort of how it happened, and they were able to get bipartisan support. If you look at like 2 bills particularly that put in place a lot of the efficiency laws that we have today, the 2005 Energy Policy Act and the 2007 Energy Independence and Security Act, those were both passed under the Bush administration, I think both in split Congresses, but certainly with pretty strong bipartisan support. And so, I think what just happened in terms of the IRA, and then the repeal of the IRA is a big break from that. And I think, what we're seeing now is quite punitive policy against particularly wind and solar, but also anything that sort of has the green, kind of label on it. And that's regardless of the economics of the case. And it's sort of this weird dynamic where it's becoming more cultural or tribal, like a lot of the other things. And to my mind, I think that's really sort of silly. We should be looking at these things on, from a lot of different perspectives. And there's a lot of need for a lot of these different technologies, and certainly for high performance buildings. It's hard to know, I think, at this point, how much of that is just coming from the president. The president clearly is not a fan of wind and solar, or water efficiency and some of these other things, or the rank and file Republican members. But I do think there's more bipartisan support than perhaps meets the eye. And I also would say that I think that the electrification movement that really gained steam the last couple of years of the Biden administration, contributed to that. That kind of exacerbated a little bit of the division around how these policies were approached. I think we as a community, if we can do anything, if you're supported with these kind of policies, it is that we need to focus on disrupting that narrative, and we need to depoliticize these issues. I think if you pull in a congressional staffer, a state legislative staffer to a high-performance building that's got a lot of cool features and can do a lot of things and deliver all the benefits that we know a high-performance building can, it shouldn't be a partisan thing. I mean, it's just an advanced high performance building, and we need to get back to sort of showing. I think that instead of kind of telling, what should or should not happen, and that it's about smart planning and building, and also putting the U.S. in a position of leadership in these growing sectors. Addressing emissions is hugely important. And at USGBC, we are not in any way backing away from that, but it certainly is not just about climate. It is about reducing stress on the grid, particularly now when we're seeing this rising demand that everyone is talking about and rising prices. It's about lowering operating costs. It's about being more resilient in a disaster. It's about reducing risk. I think we should be looking at this as a global competition for what will be very lucrative markets, and that certainly includes around high performance buildings. I do think that is still happening. It's important, I think, to say out front, and I think you guys, if there's a lot of developers in the room, you know this more than I do. That policy is important, but it is not the end all be all. I mean, it is an accelerator. It can drive investment into markets that may not see it. It can bring in new market players, but overall, it's not the end all be all of driving activity. And I think we expect to see and are seeing. I've been in a lot of events, over the past couple of months, where we're really seeing a strong continued commitment to sustainability and continued investment in green buildings. And we know the reason behind that. I mean, we know the market push, and I'm sure Monty will talk about this. This is going to be sort of the gist of what Monty usually talks about is, the access to capital, the cheaper capital, the green premiums, all of the things, all of the benefits that you can get from high performance building. Regulatory risk, we know while the federal government is certainly paring back its policies around these issues, states and local governments are not. You see building performance standards proliferating, and I think we will continue to see that when city leaders look at where their emissions coming from, it's buildings. Really 60, 70, 80%. And so that's where, you're seeing that drive a lot of the local and state policies that are emerging. And then there's the element of risk and what's happening with insurance markets and disasters. And, I think if there are climate skeptics out there in politics, I think we know that there aren't in the insurance markets and increasingly in the investor world, that this is business. They know there is huge risk here, both regulatory risk and disaster risk, and uninsurability or no access to affordable insurance. Those are all massive risks that are laying out there. And if you're if you're looking at building a building today, or doing a major retrofit of a building today, those are obviously things that are going to be top of mind. Okay, so that's a lot of stage setting, and I think maybe we could jump into what happened. And again, I know Abby and Monty are going to go into a little more detail, so I'll just do sort of a higher level on that of what was in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and maybe first just a quick overview of the IRA. I know we're all familiar with the IRA and probably tired of talking about it, but this is the largest clean energy bill in history, certainly in the United States. And it was mostly tax incentives. It had, some grants and other programs, but no mandates or anything like that. It was tax incentives. Again, going back to the bipartisanship, it used to be that was the sweet spot for bipartisanship is incentives. You don't require anything. You don't mandate anything, regulate it. You don't have huge, pots of money to give away for the grants and things. You give people tax incentives to do certain behaviors, and that was the sweet spot. And this is, the OB3 was a departure from that. I think also one of the strongest features of the IRA is that it was intended to be long-term policy. 10 years or more in most cases around those tax incentives. It was a little slow to get started. I think the first year or two, people were really getting up to speed and learning. It was very complicated. It was a lot of new stuff. We talked to a lot of talk to universities, sustainability directors at a university would say, I'm talking to my finance office about these credits, and they don't believe them. They don't believe that they exist. And then, they'd have to point them to the law. So everybody was really getting up to speed. But I think what you really saw was them taking off in the marketplace, sort of right around the end of last year and this year. You really saw awareness, and people were proving them out and showing that they would work and that you could get them, the reimbursement on direct pay or whatever it was. And that's what's really unfortunate. I think is how they were really starting to take off just as the political change happened. So I'll talk about, there were, I think to our eyes, there were 5 key tax incentives in the IRA for buildings. There's the Section 48, the investment tax credit, the ITC, which, most people think of around sort of on-site wind and solar for buildings. It's a 30% tax credit for the most part if you meet the, some of the requirements. And you could get as much as 60-70% if you met some of the other sort of like domestic content requirements and things like that. That is probably the in terms of traction, that is one of the ones that was getting the most traction in the real estate market. I think the economics around solar, particularly on buildings, just became really, really attractive. What happened with this is again the Section 48E tax credit, is that it was terminated early only for wind and solar, not for other clean energy technologies. If there's storage and anything else that can demonstrate zero emissions continues, but for wind and solar particularly, and again that's sort of why it gets down to this. It's almost sort of punitive to these industries. Those are phased out earlier, and again. There's a lot of nuance to this, but to still get those tax credits, and you can. There's a little bit of a runway here. You have to start construction by July 4th of next year, 2026, or you have to be placed in service. You have to complete your project by December 31st, 2027. Start construction is a work of art. As a term of art, and they have put out guidance on exactly what that means. And there's a couple of different ways you can demonstrate starting construction, and so those are things to look at if you're looking at it. But those that 48E tax credit for wind and solar particularly is going away soonish. And if you have a project underway, definitely recommend taking a look. There are also, when we're waiting for more guidance on this, about complex foreign entity of concern requirements. So if the project has a lot of content coming from a prohibited foreign entity, which is mostly China, it also includes a list of countries like Korea and Iran and others, but we don't buy a lot of stuff from those countries. So really it's China. If you have content or investment from those countries, there are going to be some requirements and restrictions. And everyone is watching those sort of with bated breath to see how cumbersome those restrictions are, because they could be problematic. One wrinkle with that tax incentive, the investment tax incentive, I will point out, is geothermal heat pumps. They remain untouched by the IRA. So geothermal heat pumps on a project, there you have until they start a phase down in 2033 and it ends after 2034. So another, a 10-year runway again for the geothermal heat pump credits, and we really heard a lot of exciting discussion, particularly school districts and things like that, but also private companies. I know there was a project in Manhattan that was putting a geothermal heat pump system in a massive building in Manhattan, in part, due to that tax credit. Really lucrative credit there to take advantage of if that is at all in place. And also, I will point out that the direct pay and transferability provisions of the ITC, both for geothermal and the other technologies, is still in place. So if you're a public entity and you want to take advantage of the tax credits, you can. You can essentially get a rebate for the tax, for whatever, even if you don't have tax liability, for whatever the value of the tax credit you have earned. And then transferability, a really important thing for REITs and others who may have tax liability but don't want to take the tax credits, or don't have enough tax liability, can sell those tax credits on the market, and get a very good return. A few other tax incentives I would point out. One is the 45L tax credit for a new energy efficient home construction. This is one that we really worked a lot. It's single family and multifamily houses, and it was $2,500 if you built to Energy Star and $5,000 if you built zero energy ready home standard at DOE. That is terminated after June 30th of next year, 2026. And unfortunately, the house must be, or unit, apartment must be either sold or leased by that date, by June 30, 2020. So very tight timeline if you know, obviously maybe a single family home could get under that soon, but going to be very difficult. And then 179D, the tax deduction for commercial buildings. We hear a lot of mixed reports about 179D as a deduction, not quite as lucrative as you know, the ITC. But still something that was getting used a good bit, and there was also a retrofit provision in the IRA that was going to make it easier to use this tax incentive for retrofitting existing buildings. That is also terminated. Projects have to begin construction by June 30th, 2026. And then finally, the Section 30C alternative fuel vehicle refueling property credit, the clumsiest name of all. Which was basically EV charging, any other kind of alternative vehicle infrastructure that you want to install, like in your parking lot, EV charging. That was structured similar to the ITC in terms of how much money you get. Usually, you know, the standard about 30% tax credit, and it's terminated June 30th, 2026 as well. So a little bit of, you know, time to do some of this, but again. They had been, you know, all of these things have been in place for 10 years through the, you know, early to mid 2030s. So it's getting cut short quite a bit. Some good news around tax in the IRA. You all may have seen the bonus depreciation was made permanent. The bonus expensing for real estate, you know, a couple of wrinkles there. It does not, you know, where you can immediately expense these investments. There's a lot of limitations on what qualifies. It's not for new construction. It's only commercial buildings, not multifamily, and only for qualified investment, which is, you know, largely stuff that goes inside the building, not outside. But some of the there's no, you know, efficiency or sustainability criteria involved with that. Also, you saw the low-income housing tax credit expanded in a pretty significant way, and the new markets tax credit expanded. The tax credit encouraging investments in low-income communities. So definitely some improvements there. I think we're coming short on time, I think, but I just did want to talk about a couple of other things that are probably of interest where we're also still playing defense, and you know, there's some activity. One is Energy Star. You all may have seen that the administration proposed to eliminate Energy Star in its budget and has talked about privatizing it in some way. You know, we were fortunate we had both the House and the Senate included in their appropriations bills that haven't passed, but they're in the bills that you know, calling for full funding for Energy Star. So you know, Energy Star is still limping along. You know, there's a lot less staff there, but it is functioning. I know Portfolio Manager is still live. I think they heard a note out around the shutdown, saying, you know, we could have some issues coming up, but we are hopeful that Energy Star will stay at EPA and get full funding. I don't know. It's unclear at this time what the administration is planning to do. And just a couple of other quick things. You know, what's happening at GSA with federal buildings, if you work on federal buildings, GSA has really pulled back on its sustainability. I think there is opportunity to do some. You know, you can do LEED certification still. It just has to be shown to be cost effective, which should be possible. HUD is pulling back on, you know, its code updates and requirements around projects. And also has proposed to eliminate the green mortgage insurance premium discount for multifamily housing. If you're doing a multifamily project with HUD, used to be able to get a mortgage insurance discount, or still can actually. This is just a proposal. If you built to a green building certification, and they have proposed to eliminate that, or actually just give the discount to all HUD projects. So they're not eliminating it; they're just lowering the rates. And then let's see. Another big IRA thing, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which was the big Green Bank fund that was, set up a Green Bank for low cost financing with real estate was going to be a big part of that, and again, access to capital and cheaper capital. That is very much tied up in court. The administration has tried to pull back that money, and likely is going to be tied up in court for some time. As I mentioned at the top, we're also looking ahead. I think we know new opportunities will come. Not in the immediate future, but the pendulum swings, and I think we don't know what another window of opportunity for good policy will be. But we are talking to stakeholders, talking to folks in the industry about what might be most helpful to drive more investment, and so would certainly welcome any feedback you guys have on that front, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion around that today of what's missing, what needs to happen. And we don't know when that window of opportunity is going to be. I mean, I would say one thing is electricity prices, if they continue rising the way they are, historically that is when we have seen good sort of buildings-related energy efficiency policy come about in a bipartisan way. So I would not be surprised if there were some developments there. So, Ryan and Jeremy, I think with that, I'm probably at time, and I will stop. I'm happy to answer any questions or go on, turn my camera on.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ben. I will open it up for some questions because Ben is going to leave us here shortly, and unlike the rest of our presenters today, he won't be around for the closing round Q&A session later on. So, are there some questions? Yeah. Fredo.
What are people not talking about that they should be at the Hill?
On the Hill?
Yeah.
Do you mean elected officials or people like us?
So people like us, like what's not getting talked about that should be?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think it goes back to the issue that I think we need to do a better job of showing the holistic benefits of great building. And not just climate. I think for a while there's a lot of people that were focusing on the climate benefits, and I mean, look, that's very real, and we shouldn't walk away from it. But I think cost benefit is a huge thing. Showing cost benefit, showing the other benefits that are harder to quantify. Whether it's water efficiency or resilience, all of those things. I think. There's a really good case to be made of why, if we're looking at building buildings today, we need to be looking 50 years out and what the world is going to look like. And are we positioning ourselves best for the future or not? And should we have policy that helps us position ourselves best for the future? I think maybe it's also not what we're not saying, but who we're not talking to. I would say we need to be talking more to people who don't like green building. We need to go into these offices and try to educate people and have a disagreement, and maybe it ends as a disagreement, maybe it just is a we agree to disagree, but at least we're talking to them and ideally doing that in the context of a construction project. Have them come out to a site and look at what's happening. If it's a particularly innovative project or if it features some new technology, that's something we're going to be trying to do a lot in the next year or so, particularly with Republican offices.
Other questions? Eric.
Hey, and I am a structural engineer by background, so I guess kind of the other side of sustainability, new design is kind of resiliency and future proofing of our buildings for climate events or weather events. And maybe you mentioned it and I didn't realize it, but are there any incentives available surrounding like hardening or future proofing or something like that?
Not yet. Not at the federal level. I mean, I know there are state policies that are sort of emerging around that issue, and it is, in some cases that issue is a state by state, depends on the threat. But that is definitely an area that we are looking more closely at. How could you, what kinds of policies could you implement that would encourage that investment? that increased investment that is, targeted to the specific risk that a given region may face, or flexible enough that could be used to target that risk. And there's obviously a lot of forces that are driving that conversation. What's happening in the insurance markets being, the biggest. And I think that is going to, at some point, it seems that issue is going to give in some way. Because obviously, if the entire real estate sector financing rests on the insurability of property, and if increasingly, the insurance companies don't like dropping coverage, right? They want to write as many policies as they can. So it's not like they want to do this, but the numbers they're seeing don't add up. And so I think at some point, something's going to have to give there. And a lot of that plays out in local insurance commissions, state insurance commissions, and things like that. It's not necessarily federal policy, but we're certainly looking at that issue closely and trying to see what a federal solution might be. There's a lot of FEMA programs and other things like that where that question is is a big part of it.
Good answer, Ben. I think that insurance thing may come up in our panel discussion later today as well. Last question for you from Ryan.
Hi, Ben. Brian Hanchy. I'm a local consultant in management efficiency here in Kansas City and around the area. I had a question. I think this goes to the last question about what we're not talking about. Just curious where USGBC is at on. We're seeing, I think over the last 20 years, great gains through energy efficiency and all the things that we've adopted. That's helping create a lowering on the base load, right, on the grid. But at the same time, we're seeing a massive hyperscale growth in data centers that are like plugging in new cities day by day. Where's USGBC on talking to the Hill about, hey, as we're trying to make these efficiency gains, we're losing on the other end in terms of operational costs and development costs on the hyperscale growth. I mean, we all love our social media, so I don't think data centers are going anywhere, unfortunately, too soon. So just thoughts on where that piece in the conversation comes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just more, it's a piece of it's helping to drive the narrative of the need, right? I mean, I think the way I look at that is it just shows why we need to focus on efficiency and the demand side as much as we do. I mean, there's so much of the conversation is around energy generation and what type of energy should we be producing and where and how do we distribute it, instead of, oh, how are we using energy and what can we do to use it more effectively? And that's why, USGBC, and before USGBC, I was with the Alliance to Save Energy. I've worked on energy efficiency for a long time, and it is, my favorite issue because I think it's just so underappreciated and undervalued. And so, yeah, I think the increase in demand just shows how important it is, and we will certainly, use that or talk about that when we're talking to policymakers. And it obviously has their attention. I mean, it's all over the news, and it's all over, there's bills that are being, introduced around, how do you deal with this? And it's a big issue in local communities, obviously, where AI centers are being built. So, yeah, it's just helping to drive the narrative.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ben. We appreciate everything that you're doing. I know you and the rest of USGBC were relatively on your back foot at the beginning of this year, and we just know as you start to get settled in, as the dust settles on what's going on here, we just want to encourage you here from the middle of the map to keep fighting the good fight, keep on punching. Thank you.
Gary, well, thank you very much, and sorry again I couldn't be there in person, but great to talk with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana, you're up next. If you'd like to come on up, would you prefer to use the handheld mic or over the ear?
Oh.
So what's coming up next is a series of 3 speakers. We'll have a little break in between here, but just to stretch our legs, and there'll be some snacks for you out. So we'll do that break after a couple of speakers, but we're going to get started with Dana Gordon from TRC Companies, and she's here to talk about utility centers.
Switch. Well, I'm just trying to. Yeah. Please.
You're patient.
There we go. So throughout today, as you hear from our different speakers, if you have questions that are present in your mind at that particular moment, if you do me a favor and scan this now, it will open up an app or just a website on your phone where you can type in that question, and we'll be able to see it and collect them throughout the day and save them for our last sort of 30-minute lightning round of questions for the full 6-person panel. So if you can collect those there, we'll be referencing them throughout today.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. My name is Dana Gordon, and I am with TRC Companies. TRC Companies is like an environmental and utility consulting company, and we actually run about 200 utility programs across the country. And so I'm going to talk very specifically about Evergy, our friendly utility here in town, and what you can possibly do with your buildings that Evergy would be able to incentivize with. So Ben kind of touched on some things about policy and so forth. And if any of you were here last year at the financing forum, and I spoke, the programs look completely different today. So buckle up. Okay.
We lost the projector for a second here. We're working.
Yeah. So, so TRC administers 4 programs with Evergy. The Business Energy Savings Program, most people are very familiar with, which is the incentives for energy efficiency on existing buildings. We also have, don't forget, Kansas came on board last year with the programs, and we also are implementing the Business Demand Response Program, which Ben also kind of touched on. And that is going to be kind of a way for you developers as to thinking about how your building is going to work for you in the future. And I'm going to try to kind of paint how, paint how it's going to be looking for Evergy to be able to survive and keep costs low and everything with those data centers coming in and so forth. All right, looks like I am rocking here. So again, Missouri, Kansas, the 2025 programs. I don't know what 26 is going to look like. The Business Demand Response Program, and then the quick talk about the EV charging network. All right. Okay. So again, well, this is just covering what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to focus mainly on the BESP and the BDR programs. But don't forget there is a residential program. All right, so last year, there's cycle programs. So Evergy would apply with the Public Service Commission. If you're not familiar with the Public Service Commission, they regulate the public utilities, tell them what they can and can't do. Well, we had an end of a cycle program in 24, and the Public Service Commission told all utilities across the state of Missouri, no lighting. We're taking out lighting. And they also, so with that information, Evergy, who had applied for a 4-year program, dropped it to a 2-year program. So the program we're in now is running through the end of 26, and Evergy is gathering all the data and information that they are hoping to bring back lighting incentives in 27. And this is just Missouri only what I'm talking about. So the program specifications, I mean, there is still money available. A customer is eligible up to $500,000 per tax ID number. And, you can submit. It's very flexible. Get to know the, I'm called a BD. Get to know your energy outreach rep There's several of us actually now, 8, 9, I think, working on the programs that can help you find money, and that is my job, to spend Evergy's money and to save energy. So, I'm not going to go through all the details of the programs because you guys are somewhat familiar, and really each case is its own. Okay, so I'm going to zip through these, but these are just some of the examples that you can see. These are standard incentives that if you have existing buildings that you're looking to improve on, controls, we've got incentives for that. These just recently came out. The incentives are very, very nice right now in Missouri. So it's amazing. Everyone was like, well, with lighting, where's the program? These are all called non-lighting incentives, and there's plenty in there to help all the equipment and everything be more efficient. Oh, and there is lighting controls. So lighting controls are considered a non-lighting measure. So there is plenty of opportunity. We also have, if you're not familiar with the program, what I just showed as a line items and stuff, there's standard incentives, and then there's also the custom incentive. So looking at some of the different categories, and custom kind of covers thinking outside the box of how your project to be more efficient. So they mentioned geothermal earlier, and building envelope, insulation and stuff. There is some opportunities there. Okay, so let's chat about new construction since we're talking about developers in the room. So in Missouri, there is still a new construction program. However, the Public Service Commission deemed that any jurisdiction that has already accepted the 2021 IECC energy codes cannot participate in the new construction program. So that includes Kansas City. However, Evergy goes to Sedalia, Warrensburg. I mean, it goes to lots of areas in the state that have no energy codes and so forth. So there's definitely some opportunity. The new construction program is designed very similar to the standard and customs, and those incentives that I just briefly went through would be the same for the custom program as well. So if you have a project outside of Kansas City proper, you do need to get it completed by the end of 26 because that cycle program that I was discussing will end. And I don't know what 2027 is going to behold. There is, these programs are made available because of the MIA Act in Missouri, and which was made into law in 2009, that public utilities are required to provide these programs for energy efficiency. And really for many years, these programs prevented Evergy from having to build any more power plants and so forth. But here we are in this day and age of AI and so forth. Data centers are coming in that Evergy is going to have to build more. Now, just an FYI on Evergy, they did get the approval on 2 solar farms in Kansas and 1 in Missouri from both of the service commissions on both sides of in each state, and they will start construction on those before the deadlines. So anyway, so there is new construction, just really not in Kansas City. And quite honestly, I was talking to Jeremy Friday that Evergy wants every building to be as efficient as possible, especially the existing buildings, because like Ben said, the existing buildings make up 60% or more of the emissions and stuff in the country, and so these programs have also been helping with that. Okay, let's get over to Kansas. So Kansas, since they started the program, well, actually they started in 24, and we will, but the program does run through the 2027, end of 2027. The Public Service Commission, which is the Kansas Corporation Commission, over on the Kansas side, they, right now, there is no new construction in Kansas, but it is in the tariff. They, the Corporation Commission is really just baby steps into this whole energy efficiency thing. They didn't have incentives over there since 2010. And so the commission just really wants to make sure these programs are working the way they should. They actually wanted everything to be custom, so they would have, everybody would have to engineer up and figure out the exact savings to put in a new HVAC system and so forth. And TRC worked very hard to not make that happen, because that would have been a lot for all of us. So anyway, here we are. Kansas programs. Again, just like we tried to make it mirror Missouri, make them look alike and very similar, and that didn't really quite work out, but there are some things. There are standard incentives that we got approval for, and then you can see in the dark blue square that there are custom incentives, just like in Missouri. The incentive numbers are different, so you'll need to, consult me or any of my associates, or look at the brochure closely, make sure you're looking at the right one. So like I said, Kansas is currently in a 4-year cycle program, started in 24, it will end at the end of 27, and Evergy will again apply for a new cycle program. So they did not change the incentives in 25, and they did, which is amazing, because I've been working with Evergy. Well, I've been doing, before I started working for the utility side, I was like a lighting contractor for years. So I've been doing the program and knowing the program for about 13 years. And they didn't change the incentives in 25, which was kind of surprising. But we did get a late start in 24. We didn't actually get the program rolling and approved until Memorial Day of that year. So again, the cycle program will go through the end of 27. Updated incentives would be coming next year, now that Evergy and the KCC have like a clearer picture of how these programs are running, who's benefiting the most, and so forth. So more to come on that. So in the Kansas programs, hey, there's lighting. There's definitely lighting, interior and exterior. And I want to, since I am talking to developers, really stress, if you're redoing an existing building in Kansas, even though there's no new construction, there are possibilities. It never hurts to ask. So, give me a call. Let's talk about your project and see if we can even get some things. For example, so like existing lighting, tearing it out, putting in a new lighting design, that's okay in an existing building. Right at it. There we go. And so forth. Sorry. Well, this is just kind of telling the differences between standard and custom. Kansas has a custom light category. You do not have to do calculations like the word custom would indicate, but there is just a couple of extra steps. That was the only way to satisfy the Kansas Corporation Commission to add this. So, the custom light incentives, like I said, they're similar to standard, but you do need to get a pre-approval and so forth. Am I going to get back to my train of thought? No, I'm not. So anyway, like I said, existing buildings, let's talk and see if I can get you some incentives. All right, so enhanced incentives. This is required. It's written in the tariff in Kansas. So this is for small businesses, nonprofits out there. If you have nonprofits as customers and so forth, they can qualify for these because they are the ones that are paying the bills of what you are working on as far as help, redoing their building or adding an addition or so forth. So there are incentives, and this is just kind of goes over who qualifies. So the nonprofits must be 501c3. Some of the other nonprofit categories in the IRS system do not see. I've run across 501c8 for. I'm not an accountant, so I don't know all of them. It has to be 501c3. Okay, and so these incentives just are like about 30 to 50% better than the standard incentives that are in the Sunflower brochure. Okay, so that is the Business Energy Savings Program. That is all about energy efficiency, how to get your buildings more efficient, and what Evergy can do to help your building use less energy. I do want to point out real quick with the electrification that has been going on, although even though Evergy supports having everything switch over to electric, why wouldn't they? Because they're being able to charge more. The gas companies do keep a very close look at these programs, and so fuel switching is not allowed in either state as far as getting incentives. So if you're getting rid of a gas furnace and switching to a heat pump, sorry, I cannot help you. So just want to make that clear. All right, demand response. This program, Ben actually talked about it. I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive. Who all has heard of the demand response program? A few. Okay, good. All right. So this program, and I'm bringing this up for developers because so you guys can think about how you're going to get the buildings designed for the future, right? So he mentioned thermal energy storage, generators, batteries, and so forth. While there currently is no incentives for those, but all that stuff will help you once the building is built to be able to participate in the demand response program. And this is where Evergy will pay customers to use less during certain times, typically 4 to 8 p.m. Sorry, that's residential, 2 to 6 p.m. for commercial. And so if you're familiar, if you have the special thermostats in your houses, yeah, that's demand response. And you asked, and I found out that residential is kicking commercials in demand response as far as megawatts. There are roughly 70,000 customers in Missouri and 70,000 also in Kansas. Kansas jumped on this quick of residents that get the free Google Nest thermostat installed and everything, and then Actually, Evergy can control it, and from 4 to 8 p.m., it's going to do a pre-cool before that, and it's going to basically shut off your air conditioner during that time in the summer when they need it. So why do they need it? To go into detail, like Ben also said, promotes grid reliability, reduces our long-term cost of capacity, enables us to invest in local businesses, but supporting the transition to a cleaner grid. It's great that Evergy's got a lot of wind and solar in their portfolio, but there are cloudy days and the wind sometimes doesn't blow. So the demand response program also helps the renewables that have come online to, to fill in that gap when there are cloudy days and so forth. It also prevents Evergy, because when there are these events that the demand on those super hot, humid days goes a little bit higher than the capacity, which the capacity is how much Evergy produces for everybody. And you know what happens when it goes above and that grid becomes unstable, and then there could be potential outages, brownouts, blackouts, and so forth. And that is, nobody doesn't want to, we want to keep the lights on, okay? So this program can also help your buildings. So there's incentives. Evergy pays commercial buildings, manufacturers. We've got retail stores involved. Schools even help out that participate in this program. So not only will Evergy pay you to offset your demand, they will also, you're also going to see a bill reduction, and you're going to see, the curtailment. Anyway, it can help with a peak demand. If you ever really study your bill, you've got demand charges up at the top, facility and demand, and then you've got your usage and so forth. So we've totally switched over to KW here. And then, like I said, sustainability. And sustainability, why it's not being sustainable, but it really is, because if we don't have buildings and customers participating in this demand response program, then Evergy has to go buy some form of energy, whether it's off the Southwest Power Pool or buy more coal. And usually what they buy to supplement in a fast situation is going to be a dirtier energy, and we're trying to keep them as clean as possible. Okay, so this is just, I already kind of mentioned, just the kind of the market segments to get you thinking about. Really, this past summer we actually opened it up. It used to be to just all the big users, and then we really opened it up to kind of the medium buildings and customers and so forth, and it was very good. We have like over 300 companies participating in the commercial and industrial demand response, and so some of the things that they can be doing. And data centers, yes, we are going to be working on, they usually have generators on those places and stuff, and making it a requirement that they do participate in this program. If you haven't figured out, like I said, the capacity is, it hits at that lower dotted line, and if it goes up and over, we're in trouble, and we just want to keep it down below. So this program just basically, some people call it peak shaving and so forth, but it's how to get your buildings to help in the future, because this is becoming more important than energy efficiency as we move forward, and get you thinking. It's like, okay, well, so you're going to have, like, if you're going to install generators, That's going to keep your building safe in case there is any actual outages. But then you can also use the generators, and people do this all the time because you have to run maintenance on those things once a month. And so a lot of people just wait until there's an event, and then they run their maintenance, fire up their generators, and they can offset a lot of it. And then their incentives are a lot higher, and I get to give away more money. So, just real quick, I'm probably about out of time. Yes, I am. I'm after 9:30. You like trying to, like, so anyway, I've talked enough, and I can talk more and more about your specific buildings. I actually do go out and like talk to the companies and look at their bills and everything to figure out we come up with an estimated curtailment plan, and then work with that and work with customers as far as participation in the program, because it is a bit different. But I've got some customers that they have actually incorporated the full curtailment thing into everyday, the everyday process. Anytime that the temperature even gets to 90 degrees, they are curtailing during those hours. And they have seen their bills drop tremendously. Okay, so this only applies to this year. So the program ended at the end of September, and we're in the process of developing a brand new program for 26. So we should hopefully have that ready by the end of the year, and we'll start afresh. So that, and this is real quickly, just like a quick 500 kW. Evergy paid out this year $31 per kW because they committed to 6 events, and they achieved 95%. That's an A. And so they got an incentive for almost $15,000. And real quick, EV charging rebates are available in Missouri and Kansas for commercial buildings, multifamily on the Kansas side. And they're also available in your house too. So I'm still charging my hybrid on the regular plug-in, but I should probably switch it over. And that's what I got. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, next up is going to be Abby, and then following this, we're going to do a really short break for about 10 minutes. So Abby's here to talk about tax incentives, kind of picking up where Ben left off and giving us a little more detail on that. She's in from Houston today, so we're really thankful to have her. And Jeremy's pulling up her content right now, and we're going to get started right away. Again, if you have any questions for any of our speakers, use that Slido app that we showed you earlier, and throw those in, and we'll make sure we capture that at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Hey everyone, good morning. I'm going to go through a lot. I kind of pick up where Ben Evans leaves off. So his USGBC and Ben are really charged forward in writing the policy. We help make it happen. So I work for a company called Tax Taker. We're headquartered out of Austin, Texas. I live in Houston, but we have consultants all over the country to help customers all over the country. So what we do is we come in as consultants for these federal tax incentives. Many of your accounting teams, they might have a specialized team in-house, but some of them don't. And so that's where we come into play. We're kind of the bridge. We help, we understand projects, but we also understand the tax code. And so we can kind of talk between the parties and make sure that these can actually happen. I'm a professional engineer by background. I actually started my career in building design. I heard earlier we've got a structural engineer. I'm also a structural engineer. But I did building design, have my LEED accreditation, and so henceforth, that's what makes me a good consultant for this, to kind of help the industry folks, and now I know enough about the tax code to be dangerous. So, as Ben mentioned, many of the incentives now are changing, right? IRA came out a few years ago. We were all very excited about the policy and the incentives that came forward for energy efficiency in buildings. The OBBB or OB3 has been called it. It is changing a lot of these policies. Some of them are getting hit harder than others. So I'm going to go in a little bit more on the programs that have been highlighted, kind of how they work, and then what you should know moving forward to really kind of prioritize what should you focus on, what's still attainable, and how can you get that. So I expect a lot of helpful information here. I can have Jeremy coordinate to give slides to anybody who needs it, but please go ahead and submit those questions through the Slido app. So the first program I will focus on is Section 48, which is the investment tax credits. These were the credits that Ben mentioned got hit hard for solar and wind. But they were extremely valuable. And again, this was kind of a program that's been actually around for a really long time, but was enhanced by the Inflation Reduction Act. So that first list of systems, that's what the original program came out. It was a very specific list of technologies that were eligible to claim the investment tax credits. It's now actually evolved into a second tier of a program called 48E. It's now technology neutral. It's more centered around renewable energy projects that are achieving a zero greenhouse gas emissions target. That would include the solar and wind, but geothermal, as he mentioned, remained untouched. Thermal storage also pretty much remains untouched. So those are two systems that don't necessarily fall within that zero emissions target, but are still eligible. Here's a breakdown of how these credits work. So there's a base credit, and then there's add-on credits that you can achieve that are optional. So the base credit for a small project is 30%. That's 30% of your eligible costs that you're investing in that system. For large scale projects, that drops down to 6%. So think anything over 1 megawatt, or in the case of geothermal, that's 284 tons of capacity. If a large project meets prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, meaning the laborers and mechanics install it are getting paid prevailing wages and they're participating in apprenticeship programs, you actually get a 5x multiplier. So that would bring that 6% back up to 30%. So that is the one caveat for those large scale projects. They can achieve 30% if they meet those project requirements. And then you've got the add-on credits. The energy community, meaning it's located in a census tract that has retiring oil or natural gas. I'm in Texas, so we have a lot of communities that fall within that category. You've got domestic content. The domestic content requirements essentially means that a certain percentage of those components were domestically manufactured and assembled here in the US. And then the low-income community credits, that essentially is for projects that are supporting low-income communities. Tribal lands are also included in that category. And this one's actually interesting. It's only for solar and wind, and it is an application-based process. So the other credits, if you're in the energy community, and that's great, you get that credit. The other is an application process, so you would have to be approved by the Department of Energy to claim it. But as Ben mentioned, if you add them all up, on the top tier, you can get up to 70%, which is incredible. That also pairs very well with other incentives, which I'll touch on here at the end. But many of my clients were getting about 40, even sometimes 50% of their eligible basis costs back in this credit. So it's extremely valuable when it comes to installing some of these systems. Another added bonus for the investment tax credit is bonus depreciation. So when you install one of these eligible systems, their category says energy property in your tax code, which is eligible for bonus depreciation. This is an additional tax deduction you get on top of the credit. So I won't go too much into depth on it, but it adds a lot of value, and I'll show you here an example in a moment how a developer can get both the credit and the deduction and see quite a bit of value from this program. The other highlight of this program is elective pay or direct pay. So what that part of the program is, and it's available for many credits that were introduced in the IRA, is a option for tax-exempt building owners or asset owners to be able to get this credit. What happens is, let's say a K through 12 school, for example, they don't pay taxes, right? So they wouldn't normally be able to utilize a federal tax credit. Now with elective pay, they can implement a project. They can apply through the clean energy portal that the IRS set up, and instead of a tax credit, they get a check in the mail for the same amount. So this made this program really valuable. Great news is OB3 did not impact elective pay. So our K through 12s, our universities, our nonprofit organizations can still claim this benefit, which is wonderful, and it's being very widely used. Here's a great example. This is actually a geothermal project. This was for a K through 12 school in Nevada. They built a new construction school and installed the geothermal system. The eligible cost from the HVAC system plus some supporting with electrical, site work, all around the geothermal was about $5.6 million. That's what we got to take the credit against. They were under 284 tons of total capacity, which made them eligible for 30%, which is an investment tax credit of just shy of 1.7 million. So if you're thinking about a project, right, we're weighing the difference between a traditional maybe heat pump system versus a geothermal, it's very likely that this credit will offset that additional cost to go to the energy efficient geothermal system. Here is another example. This was a building owner in Texas. They installed a solar array on an existing warehouse. The costs that we were able to include pretty much were everything for the project because there really wasn't anything additional in the project besides the array themselves, inverters, the electrical to set it up, and the support system. So about $4.4 million to do that system. They're located in an energy community, which is why they were able to get the 40%. And then they also got the bonus depreciation deduction on top of it. So they got an investment tax credit of about a little shy of 1.8, and the depreciation deduction of about 2.1. So a significant benefit there. They also qualified for a Texas utility program that gave them a little bit of money for this solar array. So you can stack those programs and get a lot of benefit, but typically the rule is you just can't achieve a combined incentive above your total cost. That's the one thing to consider, but they still were able to get value from both, which is wonderful. So the stoplight on the side, that's kind of my opinion on how you should proceed with these programs. Specifically, the yellow light is for solar and wind. Solar and wind has now an expedited end date of at the end of 2027, as Ben had mentioned, or for large scale projects, if you start before July 4th and you're going to continue on for 3 years or 4 years, that's okay. You just have to start before that date. But all the other systems, they're relatively unchanged. You have until really 2033 when we start a 4-year ramp down period to claim these benefits. So this is a good program. There's a ton of value here. And I would say of all building owners across the U.S., it impacts the most because of the elective pay program. So still a good one to keep your eye on. The next is Section 179D. This is the energy efficient commercial buildings deduction. I've actually worked on this program for almost 10 years now. It's been around since the Energy Policy Act of 2005. And now, because of the OB3, it's going to have a termination date, which we'll talk about in a moment, but I do think that there's likelihood that it could come back. So what the energy efficient commercial buildings deduction essentially incentivizes is any project that touches one of 3 categories: building envelope, interior lighting, or HVAC and hot water. So these are just some examples of systems. Sometimes I give this to CPAs, so they need some keywords here. I know many of you are very familiar with these systems. The one thing that a lot of people forget is that you could actually do this on new construction and renovations. I think all of us think retrofits first, but new construction works as well. This program is specifically for commercial buildings of any size or high-rise residential, 4 stories or higher. The reason being is that we are comparing back to ASHRAE 90.1, and those are the categories of buildings that fit within ASHRAE 90.1. So you can get a rate per square foot based off of your energy efficiency for the building. You can get up to $1.16 per square foot as of 2025. We get little inflation adjustments every single year, so we'll go up for 2026. And then if you meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, here it is again, you get a 5 times multiplier. So that would take that $1.16 up to $5.81 per square foot, which is wonderful. Again, it kind of depends on really the part of the country and the goals of the project as to whether that can be met, but I have many clients who do meet that requirement. This table on the bottom is just a quick example of the range of deductions you could get for a project. So the low, mid, high, that's the energy savings you have to achieve. So 25% is your threshold, all the way up to 50%. Once you do 50% or better, you've maxed out the deduction. The deduction rate, that's what would correspond, in this case, this is if you met the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. And then the deduction range is that rate times the conditioned square footage of the building, which would give you your deduction. Now, deductions aren't quite as powerful as a credit. A deduction reduces your ordinary business income that you're taxed against. So to determine like what cash savings would you have from this, you multiply that by your tax rate. And so that's what that bottom line shows. If you have a 30% tax rate, then that's essentially what you would get, cash savings on your taxes for using this deduction. We typically use an energy modeling analysis to determine that energy savings. As I mentioned before, we could do new construction. So this isn't a before and after look at the building, which is a common misconception of the program. What we're doing is taking a snapshot of the building with the project in place and comparing that back to a baseline standard that is prescribed through ASHRAE 90.1. So whatever the minimum requirements for that building would be, that is what we are measuring it against. The great news is right now we're measuring at ASHRAE 90.1 2007. So think of LED lighting, for example. We wouldn't put anything else in our buildings at this point. 2007 is still using fluorescence in its baseline. So you're already going to get a boost from the LED lighting, tack in some HVAC controls, maybe double pane windows with some good insulation, maybe a reflective roof, and now you've got a really good project that's probably going to qualify for the 1790 deduction. Now, the one thing to note is that the code will update in 2027. So for properties placed into service in 2027, we're going to make a big jump to ASHRAE 90.1 2019. So it'll be a little harder to qualify. However, that could get changed. Right now, the program's set to expire, which means we need new legislation to bring it back. And so they could change those rules. So really anything goes at this point. Here's an example, developer, new construction multifamily project. This one was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, it was a large project of over 300,000 square feet, but they did reach an energy savings of 53%. So if you remember, 50% was the maximum you have to hit, which means they got the max deduction of $5.81 per square foot. Gives them a total 1790 deduction of about 1.7 million. So a really good result for this project. For any of you who are familiar with cost segregation, 1790 and cost segregation can actually be stacked together. And so you can add those benefits together to really maximize your deductions in your first year after your project is placed into service. So as of the OB3, our termination date for 1790 is now June 30th of 2026. That is for projects that are not started before that date. So there are nuances in each of these programs. I do think this one's likely to show up in a tax extenders package, however, because it is a real estate incentive. And I happen to be a part of a committee who's trying to help write legislation. And a lot of the feedback was, well, it had energy in the title, so we kind of threw it in. We didn't really realize that this was 1790 that we know. So we think that there is likely bipartisan support to bring this one back. But obviously the status of the government right now being shut down will impact what that tax extenders bill would look like this year. It may be a few years before we see it show up, but I do think it will show up. Beginning of construction is the important note for this one. It can mean two things: actual physical work on site, or at least that you've incurred 5% of the total project cost. So for this program, many people will be able to achieve that before mid-year next year, if they're able to get that 5%. All right, moving on to 45L. This is the new energy efficient homes credit. This is kind of the sister to 1790, or it originally acted as such. 1790 was meant for commercial and high-rise residential. 45L was meant more for all residential of all sorts. Still for developers. The point of the credit is to incentivize developers to build energy efficient. And once they sell or lease those either single family homes or multifamily units, then they would receive a credit per unit that qualifies. At its base, thanks to the IRA, Energy Star certification was what got you the credit. So every unit that was Energy Star certified, you got a certain amount per square foot, or excuse me, per unit. This one is $500 per unit. Or, again, here it is again, prevailing wage. If you meet prevailing wage, you get a 5x multiplier, which would bring that to $2,500. If you want to go above and beyond, the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program would double that. So you would get either $1,000 per unit, or again, if you meet prevailing wage, it would be $5,000 per unit. This one though is tough. Unfortunately for 45L, there's a couple of hills that it needs to climb to come back. The first is it still has the June 30th term date, but it's no longer start of construction. Now it is at the end of the project when the units are leased or sold. So as Ben mentioned in his keynote this morning, if you haven't started with this in mind, it's probably going to be pretty hard to get to that point unless you're doing a small scale, maybe single family home development. But otherwise, this one is pretty much run out its time. The other hill here is the Energy Star funding. We really need that Energy Star funding to come back, or the program is going to require some big overhaul rewriting as to what would qualify it for the credit, because if Energy Star is defunded, we just don't have a way to measure it. So this one, unfortunately for me, gets again, my opinion, but gets the red light. I'm going to jump now outside of our energy-related incentives and just touch on two more that were impacted by OB3 that might not be on your radar because they aren't energy-related, but the first is cost segregation. So cost segregation has been around, I think since the 70s. It is a great tool for developers specifically. And what it allows developers to do is to accelerate the deduction on certain components of the building. So instead of looking at a building as a whole when it hits your tax return, you break it up or segregate its parts and pieces, and you can recategorize those and accelerate depreciation on them. It's specifically for commercial buildings, multifamily. The only thing it's really not for is like your single family home that you're planning to live in. That would not be eligible for cost segregation, but anything outside of that really does fit the program. So jumping into an example for you, a developer that we worked on out of Austin, Texas, did a new construction project of a multifamily, several buildings, and a clubhouse in 2024. Without cost segregation, they would normally get about $1.6 million in deductions in their first year. With cost segregation, and at the time, bonus depreciation of 60%, they would get about $8.8 million. So a lot of added value through the cost segregation analysis in that first year. And they took a 179D deduction on top of it, so they were able to even add a little bit of additional value through the 179D program. Now, as of the OB3, the bonus depreciation has been increased back up to 100%. So in 2024 it was 60%, now it is back up to 100%. So to give you an example, just to show you the change of what that same project would be, you've got the without cost segregation on the left side, the 2024 project in the middle, and then with 100% if it were placed into service this year instead, it would give you another, almost $2 million in deductions. So again, just a very nice change for the developer and real estate community with the cost segregation, which is good, right? Not everything was bad out of the OB3. So I give this one a green light. The nice thing too is they made this a retroactive change. So any properties that were placed into service this year after January 19th are eligible for 100% bonus depreciation, which is great. Tack that on with your 179D deduction and you have a really nice benefit coming in right after the project was placed into service. Last but not least is the research and development tax credit. You might know this one. It's also been around for a very long time, but the last few years there were some rule changes in the IRS that made it a lot less valuable to folks who are claiming it. This isn't necessarily building related, but there are a lot of folks in the industry that are able to claim the research and development tax credit, so I thought I would mention it today quickly. It's really a tax credit for anybody who's doing activities in America that are centered around research and development. It's for anyone doing new and improved business components. It's technological in nature. It requires an iterative process. It is designing essentially a new solution to a problem. So think of an architectural design of a new building. that actually fits this requirement, right? Unless it's a cookie cutter school you've already designed before. Outside of that, if you're designing a new building, you might be weighing different options. If you're putting in energy efficient systems, there might be a lot of different analysis that you need to do to make sure that system runs correctly. So that type of work is what would fit within this technology and this industry. But other companies as well, software companies, maybe folks who are designing BAS, engineering companies, manufacturing, and then folks outside of us like agriculture, food processing. All sorts of people who are designing new things for us would be eligible for the research and development credit. This one can now be immediately expensed. So what was happening before is essentially you had to expense it over a 5-year period, which was really hurting American businesses that were claiming this before. Now it can be immediately expensed, which means you can take the credit in year 1 and see a lot of benefit back. Again, I have a lot of folks in the design world who are claiming this, and it's great because for all of the increased costs and business things that we need to consider, maybe this can help offset those costs that we are then translating over to our building owners. So just to highlight the programs with new termination dates, this is just what we covered today. There's many more that have termination dates, but it's a lot of information to cover in 30 minutes. So I wanted to highlight what I think is most important for you. Again, we can share these slides so that you have them. And then strategies for the future. What can you guys do? What should you plan for as you're kind of navigating the new federal incentives and rules? First off, knowing these deadlines, right? Knowing what's realistic to achieve and what's not realistic to achieve, so that if you are talking about this with the customer or you are a developer, you aren't going too far down the line on something that's just too hard to meet when it comes to time frame. My recommendation is to focus on technologies that remain unchanged from the investment tax credit. So solar and wind, if you already have that in mind and that project's moving, claim those credits. But if you're exploring for new projects, focus on the technologies that have more runway, like geothermal or thermal storage. Bring experts onto your project who understand the rules and regulations. OB3 is great, right? We all knew it came out. If you're plugged into the industry, you probably had an idea of what's going on and went to go find some folks to learn more about it. But what you don't know is often the IRS issues guidance that is not law all the time. And so that changes the way we navigate these tax codes and these new rules. So having somebody who knows this and is paying attention to this is really important, and make sure that you stay within the confines of the programs. And then 1790 specifically, I just like to highlight again, the termination is based on start of construction. So you still have time, but knowing what start of construction means and being able to document that clearly will ensure that you're still able to claim that program in 2027, maybe 2028, or future if you have a really large project. Focus on your best non-federal programs. I think we're going to touch on these in a moment. CPACE, utility incentives we just talked about, which can be wonderful and stacked with federal. And that's it. Thanks so much for having me today. And like I said, put those questions in and we'll answer them later today. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned Josh Campbell is with the Missouri Energy Initiative. Yeah, sorry. I always have my acronyms mixed up here, but he's with the Missouri Energy Initiative. He came over from Columbia this morning and spends a lot of time crisscrossing the state. He's here to support us today to talk a little bit about green financing, in particular a program that's available in Missouri called PACE. Abby actually mentioned this during her presentation, and so we have a little bit of a heads up. Only 13 states, I think it said in her presentation, do not have this. Unfortunately, Kansas is one of those states. So if you're looking to do development on the Kansas side, we don't have it there, at least not yet. So we hope to build some momentum with that and eventually get that over there. But Property Assessed Clean Energy is a really great tool for developers. It was developed for the developer market. I think originally in California, although you may know the history of that better than I do. But Josh is going to kind of get us up to speed on what that is and how it can be used and why it's useful in helping make your projects PESA. So thank you, Josh, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ryan, very much. So Missouri Energy Initiative, to start off, is a Missouri-based 501c3 made up of more than 24 different energy-related organizations, from academia to generators to users to research consultants, traditional energy, alternative energy, etc. And it was in 2015 that we were asked to support PACE because the bill in Missouri passed in 2010, and there had been only one project done between 2010 and 2014. So we launched Show Me PACE at that time, which is a statewide program. Since then, we have taken on the City of St. Louis and St. Louis County's PACE program. I will say, as far as the Kansas goes, your computer? There we go. As far as Kansas goes, I've spoken in front of the Kansas Senate twice on their legislation. We've received probably about 10 to a dozen different project proposals. Unfortunately, we can't finance those. So if you are working in Kansas, interested in Kansas, please let me know. We are talking with the bankers in Kansas who are the main opposition to that legislation. And I think we made some movement last year, but please feel free to talk to me afterwards and we can figure out what we can do. But in Missouri, if you're not familiar, PACE is a public-private partnership. We use no tax dollars for the construction, redevelopment, refinancing of commercial projects for renewable energy and energy efficiency specifically. We currently have over 20 different capital providers that compete to finance these projects. We created an open market system to allow the property owner to see a better benefit, more competitive marketplace. So hopefully their fees are lower by having to compete with someone else. In Missouri right now, our bill was passed in 2010. There was an update, but in general, it is anything that can save energy that is put into the property that has to be affixed to that property, or renewable energy can utilize PACE financing. We see solar on here. Solar is probably less than 5% of the project components that we see. The vast majority is energy efficiency related. A lot of you are looking at project development. PACE is something that can be part of your capital stack. It is something that allows you to replace mezzanine financing. Right now we're seeing interest rates at around 7%, between 7 and 8%. They are, and I'll get to the value proposition components, but while that's higher than traditional commercial, it is a fixed long-term interest rate which provides the value to that property owner, and balances, it can include, the tax incentives that were just talked about, utility and rebate incentives that were talked about earlier. There are no restrictions right now on what it can be used for as far on the PACE side. We do know SBA put out a notice this year that SBA loans and PACE no longer work together because SBA does not want to be subordinate to PACE. So for PACE to work, Missouri's law has a couple of simple components. One is that the property owner must give an economic benefit. That's a very broad, nice legislative term. Not really sure what that means, right? Well, for the districts that we serve, which is over 185 communities, we developed what we call an SIR, savings to investment ratio. Those are several components that you can calculate to determine that the property owner will save at least $1 more than the PACE amount. And that goes to the energy savings that are part of the project components. With that, you can include an energy escalator. We know the energy prices are not going down, they're going up, so you can include that. The second component is you look at labor costs, labor and operation savings from whatever you're implementing. And again, labor costs continue to go up, so you also include an escalator in that process. And finally, capital cost avoidance. For large projects, what you see is that PACE replaces mezzanine financing. Mezzanine financing coming in at 15-16%, PACE coming in 7 or 8. That delta allows for significant savings to be allocated to that property. And that alone, you have to have energy savings, but that savings right there gets a lot of projects over the hump. As I mentioned before, there's we can do retrofit, new construction, refinance. The way that PACE works in Missouri is that, I didn't go into detail earlier, but it is a ad valorem tax that is affixed to that property. It can stay on there for, according to Missouri's law, the average weighted useful life, not to exceed 20 years. So it's affixed to that property, it's recorded to the deed, it's paid and seen just like your other ad valorem taxes to the library, to the sewers, etc. In Missouri, everywhere except in Kansas City, Jackson County, we collect the taxes, not the local collector. That is different than some other places and in Kansas City. The reason we do that is because it's cheaper. Jackson County, because they're the only ones that operate under Chapter 141 instead of Chapter 140 for collection, they would charge 1.6% of whatever is being collected that year. And so you can imagine on a large project, if your PACE assessment is $150,000, 1.6% of that is a lot. And I know for a lot of you that live in the area, there's been a lot with assessment issues going on. So this is the one community that we can't collect directly. We do everywhere else in the state, and that's a flat $400 fee. Significantly cheaper for that property. But it's still collected and billed and serviced just like it was for the county. So due by once a year, billed October 31st, owed December 31st. It's late if you don't get it by midnight. Penalties of interest accrues just like taxes, which is 1.6% each month, up to 18% over the year. So those are the negative sides of PACE, right? With PACE, it can be 100% financing. It can be transferred. So if you're looking to, if you have PACE on your property and you want to sell the property, all of it can be transferred to the subsequent property owner. We simply amend the assessment contract to have their names on it, but it is still recorded with the recorder of deeds. Or, as they say, in real estate, everything is negotiable. If the parties are looking to only pay some of it off, that can be done as well, or it can all be paid off. But you can do 100% financing. It can be transferable. The first payment, because as I mentioned, is only due at the end of the year. Any project that was financed prior to September would be on that year. Anything after September is on the next year's bill. And then when you add capitalized interest or interest-only periods, you get anywhere from 6 to 48 months with no payments. And when you're looking at a property that may have ebbs and flows due to seasonal activity, PACE provides a significant opportunity because you don't have that monthly payment like you do with a mortgage or any other commercial loan. You pay it at the end. So if you are really busy in the summer and not so much in the winter, you're able to squirrel away that money to be able to pay it at the end of the year and not have that impact you. You can use it for that opportunity. Additionally, when you look at how this is utilized as a ad valorem tax, it is often considered off balance sheet. It doesn't impact the credit or the debt of that particular project. Now, again, that is something that you and your accountant have to deal with on whether or not that happens, but we do see that as a growing opinion. When you look at hotels, many of them have provided a green finance charge on their bills that can pass through to the tenants, not the tenants, but the users of the hotel, allowing them to pay some of that assessment off with those fees, that user fee. If, again, with that same thing, it allows for you to solve that owner-tenant split. It is non-accelerable, so if there is we do require a mortgage lender consent because PACE, just like your other taxes, takes that first lien status. The only first lien status component to it is that year that you owe or anything that is in arrears, anything that you missed. And so if there is a foreclosure, if you're talking to a senior lender, the only thing that is ahead of the senior lender upon foreclosure is that year's payment or anything in arrears. Everything else sits back. The property can transfer hands. The mortgage lender can get paid. The county and its taxes can get paid as well. PACE can sit there. So that, in a sense, protects the mortgage. While also, as you can imagine, everything that we're talking about installing improves the operations of that property. It improves cost effectiveness and efficiencies, which ultimately should save that property owner money, and in doing so, make that property more attractive to the current user, or at least the mortgage bank if there's a foreclosure for some unseen reason. That property's value is not just made better by some painter or something else, but by actual operational improvements. What's the value for communities, right? We're not using tax dollars, but the flip side of the coin and the benefit to that property owner is that the value of that property does go up. So tax base would go up. Jobs, construction jobs are local. So you see those benefits to the local community. That building is more attractive. That tenant is likely to stay there, and therefore it can be a stronghold for that community as well. When you look at, I mentioned this before, but key thing here is, there we go. So your traditional loan, we talked about, it's cheaper, right? Right now, you can get better rates for a 5-year loan from your local bank. And we tell any customer whatsoever that if they are looking to get it paid off quickly with under 7 years, maybe even 10, that pace may not be the absolute best because early payoff penalties do exist, and they can be significant, up to 5 to 7% if you're paying off before year 10. So you've got the term component, but if you like the long term, you like the consistent single payment every year, you like the fact that it's paid off at the end of the year and you don't have to pay it each month, the fact that you can wait 6 to 24 months, there's an absolute benefit to having this as part of your capital stack. It increases your cash flow both at the time of construction and at the end. If you were to have a project that would come to PACE and you don't have a capital provider, this is our process. You can either come with a capital provider or you can contact us, and what we do is we will send it out to a capital provider that meets your project's requirements. So as an example, let's say you are redoing a church. Unfortunately, of my 22 capital providers, only 2 of them will do houses of worship because they don't want to foreclose on a church if something goes bad. However, if you've got a hotel that is over $1 million, every single one of my capital providers will bid on that project. So the way the project process works is if you're the consultant for the property owner, you can contact us with all the information, fill out an online form. We send it out to the appropriate capital providers. They will contact you and the property owner, and the decision of the lender is theirs, not ours. We are not involved in that process whatsoever. Again, hoping that that term sheet is developed based off of competition, allowing the property owner and you to go and say, hey, I've got 7.5% here, no upfront costs, etc. So after you do that, there's a lot of work that goes in on the lender and property owner consultant side. That's the underwriting. So they're going to want details of the project, those components. The early application doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to get an idea of the size, the scope, and the components to be able to know who we're sending it to. For the final project, as I mentioned before, we have to meet that SIR. So we have to be able to have the modeling and the audit done to be able to determine if the project's going to pencil out. So that's what we do right up front as best we can based off of your data. Then we make sure that if you're a property owner, you don't have a contractor, we do have contractors who go through training. We don't recommend any of them. We will simply give you a list so you can utilize them. It's called the PACE Contractor Network. If you want to be part of that, there's no cost. There's a monthly meeting that Angela, our PACE manager, puts on. Talks to you about PACE, answers any questions you have, trains your staff, etc. So after it gets to a lender, the lender gets to us. We review the project. As long as it is a standard project, we can get it approved within the 7 business days. If it's a non-standard project, non-standard is over $10 million, you're asking the district to finance the project, i.e. you want to bond the project. The district does have bonding authority. If you are asking us to do that, it's non-standard, more expensive, more time. And if you're using alternative documents, we have standard doc sets that are set up, and if they're significantly different, not the as a lawyer, I know some lawyers like a thou and they versus I and we or whatever. So not those changes, but significant changes. It'd have to go to the full board for approval, which may take up to 3 weeks. After the project's approved, that closing, money is sent out, money is put into escrow, and then between the capital provider, the escrow agent, and the property owner or their GC, that money can be pulled down in chunks. We file that assessment with the recorder of deeds, so it's on there, and once it's there, it is the PACE assessment, the lien component for that property is set in place. Right now, as you mentioned, there's 38 programs throughout the country. There's only a few that have an open market program. Our fee structure, right, so the way that we get paid is up at the time of close. So if you have a project that you bring it to us and it doesn't close, you don't get paid. When ours is at close, which is just a 1% fee, capped at $80,000, so anything over $80 million, there's that. So wanted to give you an idea, and I will say this, on the bottom, you'll see the websites, MEI's, MOS is the St. Louis County, Set the Pace is St. Louis City, Show Me Pace is our statewide. Every single project we have done, all 70, are on that website. All the case studies are there. You can see the property, what components they use, the interest rates, the lenders, the contractors, all of it's there. But to give you an idea of like what the market is in Missouri, we're about top 10 in the country. But you can see that Show Me Pace, the statewide one, is about 50%. The city of St. Louis is about 37%. Kansas City is in the Show Me Pace district. So anything within Kansas City, Jackson County, that's all there. The other key thing that a lot of folks want to know is how does it break down? What type of projects are utilizing PACE? And what you see here is that hospitality is the number one. Now, I think that's a combination of things, honestly. I think it's a combination of that's the comfort zone for capital providers in PACE because they know that they can do them easily. They know that the cash flow process for those is an easier sell as well. And they know that dollar value is usually high, whether it's a retrofit or a new build. And most of them are actually new builds. But you can see we have right here the other is education, recreation, retail, warehouse. It's fairly broad. But we've done about 15 million in Missouri this year so far out of 5 projects. We probably have another 130 million, 150 million that are projected to close by the end of the year. 2 of the projects of this year were done in Kansas City. You break that down by metropolitan area. You see Kansas City is behind the St. Louis metro area, both PACE financing and the impact. And that's the key thing here is the interesting part is that without any public dollars, you're seeing 300, I think we're actually now at about $320 million, $330 million in PACE financing and over $1.5 billion in economic impact. So these are things that local municipalities can use as a tool without having to spend any dollars on any tax incentive. Last slide here is when you look the average size. So candidly, this is something that depresses me. The fact that you see when we first launched this program, we were at about $200,000, $230,000 as an average, and now our average is closer to $7 million. That means that those projects that actually need energy efficiency, the retrofits, the garages, the 20-unit multifamily, aren't getting funded. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Number one is a lot of capital providers are raising the ceilings, as in what their lowest amount is going to be, and that's why we are actively recruiting other capital providers, why we are actively recruiting traditional community banks. Wisconsin, as an example, has over 35 of their projects funded by community banks. So it's not that it can't be done, it's just that it's not done here. Minnesota has a fantastic story of a collaboration with credit union $10 million revolving loan fund for multifamily projects, specifically for solar. But there are a lot of examples around the country that we're trying to utilize, and that is why last month I launched what is called the National Association of Commercial PACE Program Administrators Association. National association that is dedicated to the programs themselves, not just how big of a project that we can do, but what's the process. So we look at this. We look at the addition of resiliency in legislation. So Missouri has legislation in the last 2 years. They've been talking about removing residential PACE. That's been the impetus, while also allowing the other statewide districts to bring in bond funds from other states. What we're looking at doing is removing something called first right of refusal. In Missouri, it has this really weird component in the statute that says that if it is not financed by a local bank, you have to get, or bonded, you have to get a local bank to say they didn't want to fund it using PACE. We can usually find them, but it's still kind of a headache. So we're looking to remove that. We're looking to codify that we require lender consent, senior lender consent, which we do in all 75 of our projects have done that. Make the term the average weighted useful life period without a 20-year end. So allowing longer projects, thinking of boilers, roofs, solar, etc., that you can finance the entire thing, and adding resiliency to the legislation as well. So that is what we're working on the state level here in Missouri, and obviously working with the banking community to see if we can get them involved, and if we get them involved, I think with their customers we can see more projects close at under a $7 million limit. So these are our websites. Happy to answer any other questions you have, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Josh. That was great. So obviously he's a resource for us when it comes to PACE. So we'll be available to any of your projects that maybe you want to look at that, see how that might help with the funding, capital stack, and just whether it makes a pencil. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and invite our three panelists up. So we've got Asia. I see you there in the back of the room. We got Monty up here, and then Jonathan was out in the audience somewhere. So, oh, here he is. Another hand. So, all right. I'm super excited about this part of the program because these three have done it. They've been in the trenches. I'm going to kick it over here to Jeremy, who's going to moderate the discussion for us. Just really happy to have them come and share their experiences with us today. Maybe we can all learn a little bit something from today's conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this mic over to Jonathan.
You know, to ask if to take pictures because my person said I needed pictures.
Sure. All right.
But I have to unlock it because security matters.
So while we're doing that, as a reminder, we have active questions coming in. So if you have not done that yet, go ahead and use your phone to grab the QR code and ask any questions that you'd like. Whether we're able to address all of the questions that have come in today at the end of our session or not, we will make sure that we have all of the presenters go through those, any that we don't cover in the session itself, and cover those afterwards. My name is Jeremy Knoll. I'm the president of Climate Action KC, of which Building Energy Exchange is one of our key programs. And at BNIM Architects, I am director of sustainability. So this is work and a conversation that I'm very used to. And as an architect, though, I'll say that the idea of getting up at 8 in the morning to talk about real estate finance was not on my bucket list when I graduated college, but now it's pretty important and something I think about every day. As we get started here, it feels right to be having this conversation in a scientific library, a place built around curiosity and discovery and the pursuit of truth. What we're doing in the building world isn't so different from that, in that we're trying to understand how design and energy and money really work together, how they react, how they scale, and how they serve people and communities together. And like any new field, early innovations appear to be magic. Things are working anti-gravity. Things are just happening for a few projects that seem to bend the rules. Once more people start to experiment and play around with those ideas or trying to seek that outcome, We see that magic becoming alchemy in that everyone's trying to spin their best guesses at the changes into gold. And finally is chemistry. That's where we want to arrive, when we can start to see the patterns, the systems, and learn from each other on how to repeat those same actions for the same outcomes. So that's where we are now, is that transfer of individual breakthroughs into a shared understanding. And that's what today's conversation is going to be all about, connecting the people and ideas that make this chemistry real. So with that idea, moving from alchemy to chemistry, from individual breakthroughs to shared understanding, I want to introduce our panel. So we have Asia Morris here in the middle, founder of Local Code Kansas City and co-founder of the Green Line Initiative, leading some of the most innovative and community-driven real estate projects in our region. Jonathan Arnold, CEO of Arnold Development Group, whose projects are known for long-term value creation, walkable urban design, and a commitment to building for people first. And Monty Hillman, with us from Minnesota, Vice President of SIG Earth, who helps to align mission, compliance, and investment frameworks to make high-performance projects not only possible, but also profitable, kind of an important thing. So to start with, I'm going to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves beyond what I've said. And I've told a little bit about what you do, but I'd like to hear from each of you why you do. What's your why? What brought you to the work that you do every day?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this working? Jonathan Arnold, the Arnold Development Group. I think my why is best traced through my father, who was an epidemiologist, and every day he would wake up and say, I'm off to make the world a better place, and he basically spent his life fighting Philip Morris and the cigarette companies. And for the first 15 years of my life, I said to my brother, I don't think he's gay, or he would just seem to smoke and smoke and smoke. Got into college and started going out to restaurants and bars and realizing, oh, yeah, you can't smoke in here. And so this idea of dedicating our education, our skills to something that is bigger than you, I think that was kind of all around the breakfast and dinner table. I had no desire to go into medicine. I love to build things. And so the idea of using my skills to address things like income inequality, social equity, climate change, just seemed like a natural fit.
That was beautiful. I love Jonathan Arnold. Hello, friends of the audience. I'm going to lead with my challenges. I have an ear infection on the left side, so there may be some struggle with my balance, equilibrium, sound check. But my why, very honest. I believe in radical honesty, y'all. So I got 2 laughs so far. I anticipate 5 laughs over the course of today's exchange. But don't be sad. Here we go. My why is rooted in poverty, right? Born the lowest of the low, statistically not supposed to be here. Compton, California, young, single mom, unaccredited school district, but I was an exceptional, apparently. So made it to and through law school, all the first that you want, up and down the street. Super unsatisfied with my success because I still remembered home. And at home, things weren't changing. It was many years later, and things were still low to moderate income people, poor people, my people were still struggling. So I thought, how can I best help children and families from low to moderate income communities like the ones that I have spent the majority of my life in? Real estate, I'm a first-time homeowner, first-generation homeowner in my family. Easy to do here, not so easy in California. My grandmother's shotgun house in Compton, $500,000. You can see the backyard from the front door. It's hard to enter the real estate ownership market. Kansas City is kind of easy. So I bought a house, and then I bought another, and I realized that this was something that my neighbors could do if they had access to it. Green Line Initiative stands in that gap and helps people who wouldn't otherwise have the bandwidth or the support to become homeowners. With commercial real estate, 64128, my zip code where I live and work, it's the 8th most vacant zip code in America. What that looks like is 1/3 of my community is owner-occupied, 1/3 is rented, and 1/3 is vacant, which is a very big welcome sign for crime and blight, et cetera, et cetera. To counteract those things, I decided to acquire the land for the people who occupy it and use it most, and then return it to them so they can benefit from the appreciation. I'm Asia Morris.
Wow. Monty Hillman with Sustainable Investment Group. I'll give you my professional why and then my personal why, I guess. Professionally, was at the University of Minnesota, had no idea what I wanted to do, probably in my 6th year at that point, and took a class called American Everyday Life. And I was like, I'm an American, I have an everyday life, I can do this. We were all kind of all over the board, but we had a series of classes around Yucca Mountain. This is in the mid-90s, and what was going on with plans to bury hazardous waste, nuclear waste, on indigenous lands. And I was first introduced to the concept of environmental racism and environmental justice. And I started looking around the neighborhoods I had lived in throughout Minneapolis and applying those concepts and those principles to things like access to parkland and transit and quality of life. And really got my head set and finished school focused on brownfields. Went on to work at the Port Authority in St. Paul for 20 years, cleaning up a bunch of brownfields, about everything you could do with a brownfield we've done. My personal why, and I get choked up every time I talk about this, is my girls. You know, I've got a freshman in college and a first grader. And I believe that climate crisis is real and it's going to impact their lives, and that's why I can't talk about it.
Beautiful. Thank you all for frankly a more personal introduction than we usually give at these kinds of events. I think it's important to ground ourselves in all of our why, and I'd ask each of you to think about that for yourself. Is what is your why? What brought you to this room this morning, and what keeps you getting up every morning to do the hard work, because this isn't easy work. I'd like to go ahead and start with Asia. Asia, you've been leading both the Green Line initiative that you talked just a little bit about in your introduction, and now Local Code Kansas City, two efforts that have really redefined what community-centered development can look like in our region and in America and the world. Could you start with telling us a little bit more about the origin of Local Code and the kinds of projects that you're focused on so far?
Yes, Local Code is a national nonprofit focused on building wealth through commercial in America's main streets through commercial real estate development. I met the founder of Local Code when he expressed an interest in coming to Kansas City. My focus, building wealth in low to moderate income communities, matched. We were mission aligned in that regard. Leveraging commercial real estate was a step up for me, and so we both met in the middle. That was how we started in the second half.
Was talking about the kinds of projects that you're trying to create in the Kansas City market.
Okay, so our first project, thank you for smiling, it really makes me feel better. Another laugh. My first project is the Sanford B. Ladd Elementary School. It is 3.7 acres in the heart of the 3rd District. The 3rd District has the lowest household income per capita, the highest crime rate, lowest high school graduation rate, et cetera, et cetera. It's the worst of the worst. It's my neighborhood by choice. But the Sanford B. Ladd School was closed by Covington many moons ago, and it's been vacant ever since. And while it was formerly a gym in my community, it's now an eyesore. I drive past it 4 times per day taking my children to school, right? And so nothing had been done. You asked, I had a little bit of inside knowledge because I was elected to the school board 2016 to 2019, and I saw how of the 28 schools that Covington had closed for repurposing, 100% of the eligible and available schools west of Troost had been purchased and repurposed for something meaningful to the community. The schools east of Troost on my side of town, the ones that could generate the most profit, were purchased and repurposed to benefit the commercial developer. Those that were left, like Sanford B. Ladd, they couldn't make enough money, so the community suffered. That's untrue. The school can make money, and that's what we have shown. But our second project, 2.5 times as large, 2.5 city blocks at 31st and Prospect, Mr. Arnold is supporting us. We look to, there are about 8, how many occupied homes are there in that 2.5 city block radius?
Right now, 6 to 8.
6 to 8 homes are occupied in 2.5 blocks at 31st and Prospect. That's the transit epicenter of Kansas City. Most frequently intersection of the whole city. And that 2.5 blocks has maybe 8 occupied houses on it, right? So how do we fix this? those who have the money want to make more money, and everyone in my community can put all their money together and not finance the lad school. So the lad school, $52 million for 82 units of affordable housing, low-income housing, leveraging YTech and all sorts of stuff for giving back to the community, right? These things are only possible through the knowledge of those who have experience in, I guess, in the arena, because the last fact I'll give them kind of data-driven, and you guys are too probably. Fewer than 1% of commercial real estate developers are Black, right? And fewer than 1/2 of that, less than 1%, are women. So very rarely, if ever, are commercial real estate developers going to come from predominantly Black and brown or poor communities. And so their thoughts aren't going to be a collective benefit, but instead a capitalistic personal benefit. And while that is all right, it is unfortunate. And there are some of us who can do something about it, and I choose to. Sorry for the long wind, but
That's great. No, perfect.
All right.
And I want to build on it. So I know one of the goals of the lad school development itself is pursuing net zero energy with the idea of removing the utility burden on the renters and businesses. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you arrived at that goal and what it might mean for, let me ask two things. How did you arrive at that goal? And how has that changed the conversation about what's possible both on that development and future developments that you're thinking about?
Great question. I feel your pain. I have a first grader and a sophomore in college. It is scary. To that point, I recognize I was a child growing up in an environment like this. And that was why I ran for school board, to help in education, because, educate the child and they will be successful. But if you're hungry or housing unstable or whatever your trauma or challenge might be, it makes things harder. So support the parent, and so we get to how do we support the parent. If you've never had a utility turned off, count yourself fortunate. If you've never used an infant or toddler's social security card or number to have your utilities turned on, count yourself fortunate. And so rolling utilities into a rental price is a value add for the whole family, for the whole community. When I learned, courtesy of this guy here, and this is very important, I'm going to keep pointing to this guy. There's another guy that's very important to me in this room too. He's now blushing and looking at his cell phone. But I like to celebrate the winners. But his expertise is one in that he knows how to leverage these to benefit and positively impact the bottom line. And he said, I like what you're doing. I believe in what you're doing. Try this and that. Holy smokes, it really works. Throw some solar over the parking structure, over the parking lot that you're required to have anyway, because the city needs just 20 car parking spaces per unit, and it takes care of itself. I also learned you can do something comparable or similar with wireless internet. You can provide it less expensively, but people just choose not to. And so we are choosing to for the community, because this project was done with them. And every step of the way, I think my most important or significant job is thinking, how can I benefit their bottom line?
That's great. So you've talked a little bit about the team. You pointed to Jonathan a few times, and I know the folks that you're thinking of in the audience too. But maybe for the audience, what advice would you give to others who are trying to figure out who their team is? How do you assemble this sort of cast of characters that can help you with launching a regenerative project?
The first test of strength is dealing with me, probably. I got another laugh. Thank you, it was hearty. I feel like I met my quota, but I'm going to get a full room laugh before we're done. So most importantly, I think is fit, because we aren't all going to see eye to eye, but we must all work together at all times. And so as long as the team is dedicated to getting that project done with those intentions, like you move together. There is also a very special woman in the back. Big love for Asia Morris. And we all have different paths. Like Jonathan's path, the passive house, when I learned about that, blew my whole mind away. Mr. Chip Walsh back there is the king of schools and all things development, one of my also crushes. He is the execution. He makes sure that he's done it before, time and time again. And so I'm confident with him on board that it will get done, no matter how difficult I make it. Tamara Chestnut in the back is our fundraising development guru, strategy advisor. She, decades of experience in advocating for this community. So you put in like this community, I mean my community, so you put all of these great minds together. It's like Megatron. For those of you who know Megatron, and that's a smile, I'm counting it as a laugh.
I think of Captain Planet by your powers combined.
Yeah, even better.
And so, what through this process of learning on the development project with all of these great folks, is there a change in the language or the way that you're communicating benefit to the community, to investors, to others? How do you talk about it, and how does this team either change the way that you talk about it or the language? Talk to me just a little bit about that.
I think everyone does this, but my second greatest gift is probably being able to translate to different audiences. I am not well versed in high network individual, social impact investment, shebang, but I'm getting there. I am better versed in legalese. I can read a contract and get aggressive, and then lastly, I can talk to my neighbors. And so when we have newsletters, some go out to investors so they can hear about the social impact, but also see what our need is. Some goes out to fans and friends of the project where it's just, this is our progress and what is happening. This is how you can stay involved or volunteer. The people without money don't need to worry about the nuts and the bolts while it's happening. But to that point, because financial literacy is so important, quarterly, Local Code Kansas City will share out the financials of the project so they can see what's happening, so they can see how their investment is appreciated to benefit them down the road.
That's great, and I love that idea of sort of full transparency with your audiences. So this balance between purpose and profit sets the stage for how we think about long-term value. What Asia's been describing here, this mix of vision and building community trust and financial creativity, connects directly to how developers really think about long-term value. And so with that, I'd like to ask a couple questions to Jonathan here. So Jonathan, I want to start with something that you've said before to me, which is that your work begins with the community, and that you then frame your development work around three core questions about where to build, what to build, and how to build. Can you unpack that approach a little bit for us? And how does that, second question is, how does that guide your decision making and change the financial equation of a project?
Sure. So when we started Second in Delaware, which is probably the project that most of you know about, large passive house project in Kansas City, there were no tax credits. This was pre-IRA. We had to figure out how to do this, without federal government help. And so what we started to look at is, okay, there is a stream of money that is coming through a community. And most real estate developers, because we live in such a siloed, specialized field, think the only thing that I'm in the business of is providing housing, collecting rent, that is it. But in reality, there's a lot of other streams that are coming down. And so we said, what if we could direct those streams more efficiently and question some of the assumptions? So one of those things is, where are we building? And when we learned the statistic that 26% of the average American spends 26% of their income on transportation. What if we could build along transit lines and enable people to drop a car? Could they start to build wealth if they could take those savings with some financial literacy classes and just put it in the S&P 500? Not even invest in the asset. Over 15 years, the compliance period of a LIHTC project, they'd have $140,000. I mean, that is transformative for people that have lived paycheck to paycheck and struggle with one financial hiccup causing a lot of disaster. So where we build, we think, is really important. The second thing is, a lot of developers say, I don't pay the utilities, I don't care. So I'm going to spend the least amount of money as possible, and I'm going to lease it up. And operating expenses are like death and taxes. They're all the same, and you can't get out of them, so I'm not even going to look at the operating expense side of the equation. And we said, well, that's nuts, because if you could save money on the energy efficiency side and redirect that towards paying for a better building, you'd have a better quality of life for the residents that are living there, better quiet, better thermal comfort, better air quality. That you would be able to then change other operating expenses that most people think are only going up and up and up, like insurance. Who's here a developer that said their insurance or any insurance go through the roof? We got Chip, we got a couple of hands coming up. We learned this through Second and Delaware that if you build a resilient building, basically a type 1 construction, and you really press the insurance broker to educate the market that's coming through and looking at your building, that you can cut your premiums in half. So our insurance premiums are half in wood framings. We've also seen other developers that are building with the lowest first cost experience tremendous capital expenditures over time. For example, Avalon Bay, a big national REIT, they spent $35 million a year fixing rotting balconies falling off of their buildings for the last 8 years. So what we build determines what our operating expenses will be, and that impacts what our debt can be, what our capital stack could be like, and then you can get into things, okay, how do we finance it more intelligently with tax credits and whatnot, but really questioning every assumption that our industry thinks is true. And now we're finding developers coming to us and saying, hey, can you teach us how you're doing that? Because we can't make stuff work with high construction costs and high interest rates.
Fascinating. And if you can bring that to a little bit of life with an example of Second and Delaware, and maybe thinking about some of the projects that you've got in the pipeline now, what did that thinking and process teach you about connecting building performance, tenant experience, and long-term value?
Sure. So we made the assumption, we said, okay, most people don't have the luxury of paying more to live in a green building. So the idea of like charging a premium, we're never going to get that through an appraiser. It's just, there's a few people that can. You know, most people have a lot of student loans, they've got car payments, they've got all sorts of stuff. But they don't expect to pay less. And so if we're trying to figure out how to pay for a high performance building that's going to last longer and provide better health and quality of life, if we pay the utility bill, for example, across the street, let's say the one bedroom's $1,500 and they're going to pay $200 in utilities. You come into our project, we'll rent you the same unit for $1,700. We'll pay the utilities. The future resident is ecstatic because they're like, I have one check, I have certainty, especially if it's like seniors and they're on fixed income, they don't have to worry. But our utility costs are $75. So when you take that $124 a month, it adds up to almost another month of rent. And then you capitalize that, which I always love asking this question, who here knows what a cap rate is? Okay, got like maybe 40%. So the way that you determine value in real estate is you take $1 of income and you divide it by a cap rate. Cap rates right now are around, for easy math, let's say 5%, for a little bit above that. But if you divide something by 5%, it's the same as multiplying it by 20. So if you saved $1 in operating expenses, you add $20 in value to the building. So in Second and Delaware, we're saving about $400,000 a year in utility costs. If you multiply that by 20, it's $8 million. So we can spend $8 million on better windows, better insulation, ERVs, materials that last a long time, balconies that don't rot on stairs. And then what we have residents that rave about living there. We have had the worst website in the history of multifamily operations over the last 5 years. Jeremy can attest to it. It is awful. It's about to be redone with like really great videos. I'm excited. But it has stayed 99% released because of word of mouth. And there's a couple of videos on our website. You're welcome to come and check them out. Not scripted at all. I was even at the shoot. We just sent the videographer, interviewed 4 different people across a really wide range of tenant types. And they just gush about the quality difference. And so at the end of the day, we're in the service business where we are trying to create a product that people rave about, and they get excited about telling their friends to come in, and it gives them a better quality of life. And so at the end of the day, it's about providing a better service to the community.
That's great. I think balconies not rotting off of your building should be kind of a minimum viable product, right? For example, what for everybody, all the developers and finance and all the partners in the room, what advice would you give to them, or what light bulb do you want to go off for everyone here to think differently about aligning long-term value, design, and finance?
I think the first thing I recommend to everyone is if you're working on a development project and the numbers aren't working, you're like, we just can't get this to pencil. You know, our yield, return on investment is, let's say, 4.5%, 5%, but our debt is at 6%. Well, that doesn't work. You need a yield that's above your debt, otherwise all sorts of bad things happen. Look at your operating expenses and see if a more resilient approach could increase yield. What we're finding is it does. You don't have to break the bank to get a better quality building. To get there, to really answer those questions, you need really good consultants. There's no too much capital at risk at any project. I don't care what scale it is. Do not reinvent the wheel. There's really great consultants, and Kansas City is an amazing community that you can ask around, and you can find people that have done this before that can help you and understand, okay, if we spend more money, how much can we lower our utility bills? Okay, that is a concrete number that then you can literally take to the bank. You can put that in your pro forma. In order to utilize some of the tax credits that I'm sure we're going to talk about, like geothermal is the last one kind of standing that really is appropriate. How much do I have to spend? What are my additional energy savings? Let's really dig into those numbers and understand what's the net value of the tax credits and how can I sell them, and know as much as you can about that. And then lastly, the insurance side. Really work with your brokers and say, this is not a building that I'm putting in a portfolio of 100 other wood frame buildings. Because then you're going to be the one building that's going to kind of decrease everyone else's really high yield by a penny. But go up and get an insurance policy that is just for that building, and you'll see a major difference.
So thanks, Jonathan. What you're describing, this alignment of values and design and investment over time, thinking about not just the durability of your building, but the durability of investment, sets up our next perspective really well, which is about how the capital side of the equation is evolving to meet that kind of thinking that both Asia and Jonathan have described. So, Monty, you've spent your career sitting right at that intersection of policy and capital and project delivery. First with St. Paul Port Authority, and now with SIG Earth. We've just heard Jonathan talk about designing for long-term value and stability, and you often say that the market has shifted from chasing a green premium to avoiding a brown discount. What's driving that shift, and how are investors reacting to it? Maybe describe what that means a little first here.
Sure. 20-some years ago, I thought the elusive green premium was going to rule the day, and that was going to drive all these spectacular changes. Not so much. And smart folks are really thinking about stranded assets and brown discounts. The idea being that whether it's local policy, whether it's a building performance standard, the municipal or state level, codes, market conditions, smart players are really looking years out. If we're making decisions about how we deploy capital today, what does the world look like in 5, 10, 20 years from now? Because somewhere over that time period, we're going to electrify these buildings. They're going to be powered by renewable energy. If you're making smart decisions today, you can avoid having these assets that are heavily discounted in the future or suffer a significant discount. That seems to be driving more of the thinking with our ESG clients, with our REIT portfolio clients, et cetera, modeling that out and seeing what the potential pain is. And that does make a difference.
And so just to help me understand, is that effectively, to Jonathan's point about balconies rotting off of the buildings, it's looking for a more durable product or a product that isn't going to have that kind of outcome when it's at the end of its initial incentive life?
Yeah, I mean, geothermal equipment placed in the ground is going to be there for 50 years. You're not replacing magic packs or coils in year 12 or 15 or whatever. And it's also a permanent hedge against demand charges because that infrastructure in the ground is a permanent bet against ever-increasing demand charges for energy. So that's, I guess, how I think about it.
Sure, cool. You've also described, when you joined us last year, you talked a lot about the investor and developer world as a kind of a zoo with different species of animals that behave pretty differently and are motivated differently. So how do you match the right financing approach to the right kind of owner or investor ecosystem that you're dealing with?
Well, I use the zoo animal slide oftentimes in mixed rooms like this where we've got a lot of folks who aren't necessarily commercial real estate professionals, aren't finance professionals, and don't really have any exposure to what these organizations care about or don't care about. My merchant builder clients, right? They want to build it and fill it and sell it, oftentimes before they're permanent financing on it. They've looked into things like the investment tax credit for solar or geothermal, but there's a 5-year recapture period, Monty. We can't use it. We're out. It's like, well, wait a second. Let's hit the brakes here. Through tax equity structuring, the way we would have done an ITC before transferability within the Inflation Reduction Act, they can still do it. Yes, it takes attorneys and it takes CPAs and it costs something, which is not what they want to hear. But there still are tools available, and you have to understand that zoo animal. Those merchant builders are going to look at things differently than our mush market clients, those that are long-term holders with long-term value and vision, different than owner users or REITs. So the structure of these real estate entities and these owners really really helps understand which of these tools they care about or don't. And if you're not cognizant of that, oftentimes as those trying to assist these folks, specifically if you're not in that finance world, it can shut down the conversation damn near immediately. You're like, oh, you didn't realize we're a REIT, we don't pay income taxes, get the hell out of here. And so really understanding what their motivations are, what their exit strategies are, what their portfolio strategies are, is really helpful to sort of getting your way under the tent flag. Because I can tell you, I'm typically directly contracted with an owner because I need to talk to them about a couple of things that they don't want to talk to anybody about, which is how much money are you making and can we make you more? And how little in income taxes are you paying and can we help decrease that? And so there's already some walls up around this bevy of professionals, this multidisciplinary approach to get into that inner sanctum and really help unlock some of these tools. You need to have a broader vocabulary. And I think that's one of the things I have come to over these last couple of years of working on this stuff is there's just a complete disconnect of even simple vocabulary across disciplines. And it really takes, specifically on the tax credit stuff I work on, Abby knows this, I mean, it takes 6 or 8 different disciplines to get it right. You've got design folks, engineers, architects, you've got accountants, tax attorneys, you've got capital providers, you've got appraisers, you've got maybe brokers in the mix. Like, someone's got to translate across 6 or 8 different disciplines to keep the wheels on the bus. So, expanding our vocabulary, getting out of our comfort zone, and learning what some of these words mean. Cap rate, we talk about the ERV calculation quite a bit because it's so fundamental to how commercial real estate is valued. I guess that's the other piece I'll throw out there is appraisals. So the Appraisal Institute, I found out, does have a green appraisal you can request. Last I heard a few months ago, it is only for single-family residential homes. But if we had appraisers that were a bit more tuned in and willing to absorb higher NOI because we've done something cool with utilities. It was 20 years of data on LEED certified buildings showing there is a market premium of 3 or 4%, but that means something in valuation. I think the multidisciplinary approach only needs to grow to help build momentum and scale.
That was a great answer. You answered 2 more of my questions that I had for follow-ups already, so I think we're in good shape. So Monty, that idea of aligning people, admission, and capital really connects back to what we've heard from Asia and Jonathan about partnership and long-term value and the systems that hold it all together. I think that what I'm hearing and what I've gleaned from being in this conversation for a little while is that as an architect who's trained to think in systems, how a mechanical system relates to the building envelope, relates to the city in which it's contained. We're at a point where finance requires that same level of systems understanding and having the right partners who can really be the experts on each layer of that system so that we can start to bring it all together. So we've heard some really great and connected stories here, partnership and purpose. You each described a piece of this emerging chemistry between people, performance, money. Where do you see those reactions happening most effectively right now in the Midwest, in the Kansas City area? You can go further out if you'd like, but really thinking about how it impacts our kind of Midwestern market. Where are the partnership and financing and purpose all clicking right now? What are those projects that you're excited about? Could be your own projects too, but.
Well, I think one of the challenges we're in right now is we're in a very high interest rate environment. And so it is difficult to get things to cash flow. And I mentioned the disconnect between project yield and where debt is. So one of the things you can do is utilize really tried and true tax credit programs like the LIHTC program. If you have an affordable set aside, you can also generate local housing tax credit equity to bring down your effective cost, which is another way of bringing up your yield. And so if you have free money coming in that doesn't have a repayment, maybe there's a small percentage of cash flow, really looking at how some of that equity can come in to increase your yield. Same thing with geothermal. As I mentioned, that's another way. If you twin low-income housing tax credits with geothermal, those two, they don't reduce each other. So if you get a 50%, if you're in a project that is brownfields, let's say there's some lead paint somewhere on the site, or asbestos, and you buy American content, so the heat pumps are made in the US, you get a 50% tax credit on the geothermal system. If you are doing a 4% low-income housing tax credit project, and you're in a QCT, which about half of Kansas City is, you get a 52% tax credit.
Can you spell out the acronym?
A qualified census tract. It's a level of distressed kind of measurement of the economic spectrum and history of this investment that says, hey, this neighborhood qualifies for additional tax credits. You get another 30%. So a 4% tax credit, which is over 10 years, equates to a 40% tax credit, but the 130% phases boost brings that 40% up to 52. So you can twin a 52% LIHTC credit with a 50% geothermal credit, and you basically have 102 cents for every dollar you spend on your geothermal system, and you might sell that credit combined for somewhere in the mid to high 80s. So one of the largest things in your construction budget, being mechanical services, now is 15 cents on the dollar. And so that is like the one thing that kind of in our mind remains after the one big beautiful bill, besides 100% bonus depreciation, which had the effect of increasing local housing tax credit pricing by about 7 cents. And so the mission I'm on right now is holding the syndicators that are buying tax credits and keeping them honest and saying, look, this bill just increased your yield, so how about you give us better pricing? And they're trying to do the opposite by saying, well, there's going to be so many more credits, and well, remember supply and demand laws. So if supply goes up, price goes down. You know, unlike I don't buy it, your yield is going up. You should give us better price. So knowing all those numbers and being able to sort of fight for what is fair, I think is really important. The energy savings, they're just there, right? I mean, to get to passive house is somewhere like a 3% premium if you're not going to build to the resilient materials that we use. And if you could save several $100,000 in energy costs, that could make a project pencil. But we do recommend going to a resilient building, get that insurance safeties because your tenants and whoever owns that building, and even if you just own it for 1 year, your merchant builder, you can still value that increase in NOI day one, and when you sell it to a pension fund, they'll value that. Our submission long term is to get the institutional investors that are buying multifamily, the pension funds, the life insurance companies, the REITs that are buying 250 units at a time. If they can understand that they could have a better product and change their acquisition criteria and say, we're not buying junk anymore, the merchant builders who are building cardboard buildings wouldn't have anyone to sell it to. And so I think that's where we're going. So the more that we can build and lean in and get the right consultants, get the right team on board, the more that we will show those institutional buyers who pension funds need long-term stable cash flows. They've got obligations to pensioners. They're looking for yield. And if their balconies are falling off after 5 years and they're spending $35 million a year on fixing balconies, they're not going to get the appeals. So there is some good news. The good news is that this is not solving cancer. All of the solutions exist. We know what we need to do. It's just the knowledge is atomized right now. And I think things like this help bring it together, and you need to continue to do that more.
There's some practice we help me. Any other comments on that, Monty or Asia, about sort of what's going on?
The consultant, I don't know if I haven't encountered anyone more knowledgeable than Jonathan in a while. I mean, I'm not even tell the truth. But so everything he said, cosign.
Right on.
I would say yes, LIHTC with geothermal paired with solar, crushing it for all the reasons you stated. You know, $4 million first cost to go geothermal, bringing back $5 million on a first cost basis, you know, equity at closing. And Mush Market, working on a bunch of the community centers, public facilities, big energy hogs, again, with a long-term vision, long-term value, operational savings. That seems to be working. The other thing I'll add is, how many of you in the audience have worked on or are familiar with green leases? Okay, what Jonathan is describing is basically what, as a broker, I would call a modified gross lease, because you're bringing in the utility costs as a landlord-driven expense you're billed for. I'm currently working on a white paper with Institute for Market Transformation. They do a lot of work, their Green Lease Leaders program, check that out. They do a lot of work on green leasing. But I started talking to them after one of these types of presentations about the fact it wasn't too practical. It's a lot of lease language about access to data and energy information, and I'm like, I want to get under the hood and see the nuts and bolts and see the rates and see how it's structured and see how it's driving NOI, because it is the solution to the split incentive, is a green lease or a modified gross lease. So, and that freaks my broker colleagues out. Monty, if we bring anything other than triple net lease to investment committee, you know, we're gonna get laughed out of the room. There's literally a happy hour conversation 4 years ago. So there does need to be some changes in perception in the marketplace. And when they see it in black and white, they see the numbers, I think it helps that understanding. So that's what I'm trying to work with IMT.
So with a minute left before we bring our other panelists back up here, Let's think about how we make collaboration real, because that's I'm hearing that over and over. Is it's sort of connecting all the dots here. So, if you could design a better way for those worlds to meet between community, developer, investor, what would it look like? What kind of platform or policy or shared data would make your next project that much easier?
I'm going to come up with a really simple step one, which is that we're social beings. Part of what's driving this, we want to live in places that are walkable, is that we like seeing each other, right? Like, we're rediscovering this after 25 or after 75 years of suburban experiment in the car. Average American will spend significantly more living in a walkable neighborhood, as 60% say they want to live in a walkable area, which is really good news. But I think back about when I first moved here to Kansas City, and this was kind of before I had kids, maybe when they were still really young. There used to be every Friday there was an email that went out, and it was just like a location, some bars, some rooftops, some whatever, and the development community would get together just to share what's working and what's not. There wasn't any like formal agenda. It was just get together and have a joint and talk. And I was amazed because coming from New York, where people don't help each other in the way that they do here, and you would talk and you're talking about a project you're working on, and someone would say, "Oh, you need to meet with this bank," and they would do it right there, or you get a call on Monday and say, like, "Hey, we talked and let me introduce you," or "You need a meeting with the mayor." And I think more of that for the people that are working on these projects, because I might know one aspect of it. Someone else has learned something from maybe a consultant they're working with on some new heat pump, a new way to twin some tax credit. And I think just the more that we can, get out of this and talk, let's just not underestimate the age-old face-to-face.
So nothing is complicated. It's pass ham solace here. Yeah, just talking to each other. What the?
Jeremy, you have that slide deck?
Sure.
There's one I'd like to show folks. Yeah. So this conversation, this was driven by an investor who said, "We like what's coming out of your zero pro forma. It's doing great things with the returns, but what's going on?" And so, yeah, feel free to take a picture of this. We'll make sure these get sent out as well.
This will be shared. Yeah.
This is most, probably not all, but what I could throw down on a slide in an evening of the places where green financing, and when I say green finance, I really mean green design, green operations, green leasing, green exit, that whole stratum that green financing enables. Where are we making moves in a pro forma? And this would be an incredible conversation to have with an entire project team, because you're going to hear different perspectives out of those 6 or 8 or 10 different disciplines who are going to connect some dots, who they don't need to understand work in pro formas, but if the architects and the designers know that this is connected to that and it drives this number, which is helpful at the end of the day, just training the investors and the developers to think about after-tax discounted cash flow valuation monthly, the fact that these tax tools don't get properly valued in a typical commercial real estate pro forma because they're all pre-tax. And your lender's going to scream, "I don't care about after-tax, blah, blah, blah." But as a decision maker, you should know. That's all I'll say there. There is one slide that shows the results of when all this stuff works. That's the accretion schedule. Go beyond that. This was one with the full meal deal. This was before OB3. This was 45L ITC for solar, ITC for geothermal, home energy rebates, the YEAR program, PACE, etc. And so a year ago, this is how much we were moving investment returns. And whether we all know it or not, these are the numbers that decide whether buildings are getting built, whether capital is being deployed. And it's just a conversation that needs to be had across multiple disciplines.
Okay, thank you. I've learned a lot. I'm going to call you. And everyone heard that, so hold me accountable. What happens, I'm going to take more macro approach to the collaborative lens. I think from a commercial mixed use, large scale development standpoint, if you start with the community that you're entering, like we're talking about free money or ways to positively impact your bottom line. If you start with the community and get buy-in, it doesn't have to be low to moderate, any income community. And then identify a developer, or if you are that developer that can provide what they need, it makes it a lot easier, and this is where the low to moderate income comes into effect, to identify and engage social impact dollars, social impact investment dollars. And so to that extent, if your development benefits the community, there is another tranche or bucket of dollars where they ask for low returns on their investments. For instance, we're giving no more than 6% return on investments from our social impact investors at the lab school. Another benefit of collaborating with the community as the developer, you go hand in hand to identify resources. You have social impact dollars, grants, philanthropy, investments, like all those awesome things. But you also get stronger engagement from your municipalities. The city of Kansas City has been incredibly supportive of our lab school development because of the location, because it would be difficult to finance otherwise, because all the things that are working against us, they're actually working to our favor, because the local electeds have a vested interest in activating that site. All of the people do. And so when you start with community and you have that groundswell of support, your asks of pilots, your asks of tips, your asks of all the things have a whole community behind you. And so that sort of collaboration when you're going in to do a lift that may be a little heavier than you anticipate, I think is beneficial.
On that, and that money following money, right? People get confident as they see sort of more and more sources coming in. So I can imagine that being sort of a snowball effect when it works. To keep us moving in on time, the chemistry we're talking, this is exactly the chemistry we've been talking about from the start. I'd like to invite our three first panelists back up here. And as I do that, you've each shown how purpose, design, and capital can react together to create new results. We're going to see if we can kind of clown car the little stage here. And of course, none of this happens in isolation. Behind every deal are policies, incentives, programs that make or break the math, and people who translate those tools, and people who are responsible for translating those tools into action. So for our final segment, we're going to widen the circle again, or I guess we're not widening, we're fitting into it. We're densifying the circle. We'll bring back our incentive experts and others. So welcome back Abby Massey from Tax Taker, who helped us unpack the federal tax incentives, Josh Campbell with Missouri Energy Initiative, who's leading work with PACE and state-level financing, and Danny Gordon with TRC and Evergy, who's guiding projects through utility rebates and incentive programs. So we've got more tools than ever, even as some of them are modifying around us. Tax credits, PACE, rebates, grants, yet many projects and communities still can't reach them or aren't aware of them. What are the barriers to people understanding or having blind spots around these funds that are, in many cases, being left on the table? Let's go ahead and start with Dana, and then we'll come down.
Well, on the utility side, Evergy doesn't care where the funding comes from as far as your projects go. It can be a PPA. I saw some different things up there that are more common, a performance agreement and PACE funding. I tell people all the time that yes, PACE funding is acceptable as a form of payment. And just to make them understand, I actually have a Jackson County project, and I cannot convince the guy that he qualifies for the Evergy incentives because he thinks they don't because of the way the project is being financed.
So, I mean, it's real. And all of this is stackable, you know. You can take financing from here and get utility incentives on top of it.
Josh, soon for PACE.
I think the first and foremost is that people like to move. It's just like water, right? They're going to go where there's no opposition. And PACE is new. It is a little complex. It's not that complex, but it's different. So people are going to go with what they go. That's number one. And number two is that it is still dominated by specialty funders. Specialty funders have the ability to limit who they're going to fund. RUCA districts of 4 and less, which means 85% of the state geographically is no longer on the table. Projects under 5 million they don't want to do, right? So you look at like where it's needed. So it's I think that's the other part, and then the third is just awareness, knowing it's an option.
Anyone else want to take on first one? Okay, so I'm going to go into some of the questions we've got from the audience here. So my first one is going to be for Abby, which is, I think maybe is one that is a little self-serving because here we are today, but how do I keep up with the tax code updates on all the changes to industry?
That's a great question. Sometimes I even have a challenge, especially now. But no, having a consultant who specializes in this, check with your CPA first. They might have a trusted partner or an internal team that they trust and can get you updates. Coming to events like this, I think, is always important. Or finding a specialty consultant like Tax Taker. This is only our job, right? We've got a lot of folks in the industry who are very educated, but they have enough to know already. And so we can make sure that you're on top of any changes as soon as they come and are aware of anything that could potentially impact a project.
While you've got the mic, I've got 2 technical questions for you. So with thermal storage being largely untouched, as we've heard from most of the panelists today, where does lithium battery storage fall into that? Is that excluded, included? Is it?
It is included. So the credit is primarily for renewable energy, and so battery storage is included in that. Thermal storage is kind of a subset of that they specifically call out and have allowed into the code. So battery storage is first. Thermal storage is kind of its own little caveat.
Got it. And a follow-up question to that one was solar modules installed. If solar modules are installed outside, are they eligible for the new 100% bonus depreciation? On your roof or on your land?
Yes, yeah, they would be considered 5-year energy properties, so they would be eligible for bonus depreciation, at least with the ITC credits through the end of 2027. Mm-hmm.
Great. So we've all talked about how better buildings create real value a lot today, lowering operating costs, healthier spaces, stronger communities, but those benefits don't always show up in the underwriting. So how do we start translating those social and environmental outcomes to be recognized as part of the financial value? I'll open this up, probably Jonathan first and pass on down.
So we had an appraiser that accepted our MEP engineer's energy model. And so engineer said, this is what the energy consumption is going to be for this building. And the appraiser said this looked good to me. I think he had a background in utilities and industrial tech processes, and so that made sense to him. So yeah, I think it's, and we're not the only ones that have done that. I think that if you had that report, you can supply it, and if you're paying the bill, then you know what your expense is, and you can do your appraiser can do a survey of what everyone else is paying per foot per apartment for the utilities, and then get the increase on the income side. Should be pretty straightforward.
Okay. Others on the translating the performance values into finance? Josh?
An example I give is there's a funder out there called Pace Equity. They have teamed with a larger financing entity, and if a project meets certain requirements to a reduction of carbon, above and beyond just a normal PACE project where you're saving just enough, they will lower the interest rate. And so I think to both Monty and Jonathan's point, their partner has seen that there's a value proposition for an investment when they are going above and beyond. And so I think they've lowered the interest rate by 1.5 points. So I think that's an interesting thing that is starting to creep into the PACE financing side as well.
Cool. So while you got the mic, you're the winner in that you got the most technical questions from the audience of everything. So I'm going to throw a couple at you here. So how does title transfer midstream work with PACE special assessment?
So a title transfer, if you are, you would just file the document, do it with the recorder of deeds, and it sits there. It's not that technical, honestly. It's you just file the normal paperwork. I will having some residential PACE folks in. One of the issues you have with title companies is that if the realtor or the title company doesn't do the search soon enough and it gets too close to sale, then that can cause some hiccups. But the process is normal. It's just you file the paperwork, file it with the recorder of deeds.
And the next one then, is there an issue if there's already debt on the building or property? Does that impact the bank loan position or anything that folks should know about?
PACE can do new construction and retrofit. As you can imagine, most retrofit properties, that means that they've already got a loan there. We require senior lender consent, so we would go to that senior lender to get the consent to let them know. The only way that the debt plays a role is the same whether it's new construction or retrofit, and that is a loan to value. Capital providers usually don't go above a 35, and they stick usually around a 25% loan to value. So that debt, it may limit who lends or how much you can get from PACE because they want to keep that loan to value in a certain realm. I have seen certain funders go way beyond and go up to like 60% loan to value with PACE. I've only seen that once, not here in Missouri, but it is possible but that's how that impacts it.
That's great.
Something to know and think about and learn about, because there's a lot of misconceptions about PACE. The Port Authority is the statewide administrator in Minnesota, so I have 350 PACE deals, $500 million worth of investment come through our credit committee. But if folks aren't experienced with PACE, the senior lender consent is an issue, but it can be dealt with. We thought it was going to kill our program almost 20 years ago, and over 350 PACE deals, 3 senior lenders said no. The folks at PACE Loan Group, like PACE Equity, a big national PACE lender, they'll tell you they've got a assortment of 1,200 PACE-friendly lenders around the country, senior lenders. So there are a bunch of misconceptions out there. I always point bankers who are PACE scared to PACE Nation. PACENation.org is the country's organizing body around these issues, advocacy body. And they've got a great blog post I've used for like 3 years now, something like Senior Lenders Seen Opportunities with CPACE. And it's like the 6 myths that all the senior lenders have that aren't familiar with it. So check that out.
Could we, Dana, I'd like to ask you about the process of verification of the modeling. We've been in recent contact about how to do that, whether it's the simple method or model method. What are the processes of verification that we have to produce on the design and development side to be eligible for the utility incentives?
So, generally speaking, specifically to the custom program that I had a mention of how many kWh saved annually, I have a whole team of engineers that work behind me that help, and so I recommend, and they are willing to do this. It used to be you had to submit the project and get a project number before the engineers will even look at it, but there is actually like geothermal and so much stuff out there now with new technologies that they will meet with you to discuss what is needed. We'll accept just about anything as long as the calculations make sense. Whether it's just a typical Excel spreadsheet or you're using an actual software. They do like to see, if you're getting elaborate
like a geothermal, go ahead and get an energy model done for the building, and then that would be a great basis to have the conversations.
And building on something that you and I have talked about recently as well as the changes that we anticipate coming to not just our market, but most markets across America in terms of how we pay for our energy. And I think pretty much everybody in here, like me, pays a time of use rate on their home energy bills. That, by a show of hands, everybody is somewhere in there. So our understanding is that within the next 3 to 5 years, we're likely to see that kind of rate structure be applied to commercial structures. So I'm interested from each of you to think about what impact does being charged 30 cents in the afternoon and 3 cents overnight have on how we talk about energy and how we prioritize efficiency.
Great question. I'm not an expert totally on rates, but I do recommend, as far as your residential, please look into the time of use plan in both Missouri and Kansas, because it can save you a lot of money by selecting what's right for you. And yes, I do see that coming in the commercial world. Manufacturers mainly, I mean, they're just going to be kind of forced to do a little adjusting on their shifts, perhaps. They may be running at 2 shifts already and stuff, so they just may need to adjust the times to be able to adjust for that time of use that they can participate in the demand response, which Evergy will pay them, remember. It'll be interesting to see how we move forward, but all that stuff and all these simple energy efficiency incentives, controls, having a robust building automation system. The new ones already have demand response already built into them. And so it's just, pushing a few buttons and you can be off and running with that program and also participating in a time of use.
Any others on that, Jonathan?
I have a statement and a question. Keeping all of the changes in the ITC in my head is almost a full-time job. So solar, correct me if I'm wrong, that's being sunsetted if you don't start before July 4th at 26, basically say goodbye to the credit.
Or be done by the end of 27.
Right.
Okay.
Or not.
Okay. But battery storage is not been cut.
No.
Okay, so then how does battery storage get impacted by the bonuses that are right now for solar that I'm used to twinning a battery storage system with solar and then getting a 10% boost for domestic, 10% for brownfield, and then if it's a lifetime contract, getting another 20% for the low-income community. What's going to happen with battery storage moving forward with the adders?
Sure.
So the adders, at least the 2, the energy, community, and the domestic content, those are available for all technologies that are eligible in the credit. So those will always be available. Low-income community, the 10 to 20%, the application, that was very specific to solar and wind. So that will also fade out. I don't know if you've noticed, if you are familiar, so the Department of Energy has a website that essentially monitors, they get a certain funding pool for the low-income housing applications every single year. And as of the last couple of years, the applications have far exceeded what their funding pool was. So it really became kind of a lottery base. I haven't seen anything. They pretty much pulled down the dashboard. So I think the one thing that I've noted is that maybe this got looped into some of the funding freezes. And so the low income could be a little bit tricky.
Can I comment on that? So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's 4 different types of those boosts.
Yep.
So if you actually are a low-income housing developer that is applying for the 20%, I don't think that cap, there's always extra.
Good. That's great.
So we've applied for it twice, gotten it twice. It took a little bit of doing. Don't mention that there's any other uses in the project other than housing. Otherwise, you'll have to apply again. And
Sounds like a lesson hard learned.
really, and but I think the next window for that should open up in January. And if you're working on something, you get 20% on not only your solar, but you can put the battery with that and get 70%. So for the next 6 months, from January to July, you can get 70% credit plus the 52 if you're doing a low-income housing tax credit project. So you're really becomes a source of equity. So my answer, going back to with that, knowing that you can get up to 50 on battery storage. Now, getting domestic content on batteries is a little bit difficult. But if time of use is coming down the pike, anyone that has a project now, especially if it's got other tax credits like LIHTC, the batteries will be free right then. Like if you put them in with, along with your geothermal and everything else, you'll get the 50% credit on the LIHTC, 50 on the 40 maybe if you don't get domestic content on batteries. And then when time of use comes along, you can be buying power at 3 cents. And while everyone else is buying it at 30, and who knows, it might eventually be some market where you could sell it. That would be great. I wouldn't hold your breath on that quite too long, but I think a strategy around incorporating storage into your solar area. So we're working on a project right now that is 4 megawatts of solar on the roof, a 20 megawatt hour battery, and a geothermal system. And the solar and that powers the geothermal, because we're holding on to the solar in the batteries, it will power the entire building, all 395 units. We'll be able to utilize all that energy and be net zero. And really didn't cost the project anything. It just helped the economics because it zeroed out, or it greatly reduced the utility bill. And we made up for all of that cost or equity that comes into the project. So it's really didn't work.
Yeah.
And a technology we haven't talked about today, just to throw it out there, is ice storage. I know for some of our institutional projects, we're looking at a combination of ice and geothermal, really to think about load balancing for those who are using heat and cooling all the time. Monty, that triggered something for you.
Yeah, because we've been thinking about this a lot lately. Thermal energy storage under Section 48E. You guys may have heard, especially the designers in the room, about these new CO2 heat pumps. Flow is one of them. They're up by me in Minnesota. The CO2 heat pumps themselves wouldn't qualify, but when paired with a thermal energy storage medium, like an ice plant or a stratified water tank, then that system can be eligible. So what we're talking about here is shifting our thinking about how we treat our buildings from just consuming energy and blasting out heating and cooling to instead looking at them as thermal batteries. So how are you turning your building into a thermal battery, and how through your lease mechanics and your finance mechanics are you driving, frankly, greater returns for investors, developers, communities, because you're pairing up these sort of disparate disciplines and functions.
So with a couple minutes left, I do want to get us out of here on time. Let's talk about the next conversation. So the intent of this roundtable and the forum that we've hosted today is to develop this as part of an ongoing series where we're really addressing the big problems and opportunities in our market and trying to understand what needs to be at the center of each of those conversations. So who else should be in the room? What are the themes that we've discovered today through conversation that should be expanded on or dealt with in more detail? And where do we go from here? Asia, I'll just start with you if you're willing.
Son of a gun. I thought it was invisible, was not. Where do we go next? This is more of a, am I too loud?
No, you're great.
I feel like I'm yelling at everybody. For me, the most important part, because I want the world to exist for my grands, is where I waited a long time to start making children. And so the world's not as awesome as it used to be. But focusing on the people who can't do it for themselves. Representation matters, not just visually, but also having a seat there to make sure as developments occur, they are mindful of the community that they're going into. Because net zero is awesome regardless of where you put it. But every single project that goes in through local code Kansas City on the east side will be net zero because of the additional impacts you have where you won't get utilities turned off because we got it,
Right.
you know?
Nothing to turn on.
And so considering, and if you have never been in those environments, you may not even know what to consider because I saw a lot of wide eyes when I said you use toddler and infant information to get your utilities turned on, you know? And so being more inclusive, having someone at the table who's had that experience, being intentional about considering additional ways to benefit, like childcare on site or how far we're from X, Y, or Z. What does this community need? Because communities are different, you know? So I think that's my greatest dream would be in the next stage that we make sure, regardless of where we're developing and whose team it is, you have somebody that can speak for the community that you're entering.
Yeah, love that. Others, where do we go next?
Language, vocabulary, education, cross disciplines. I spend a lot of times doing lunch and learns with architecture firms, engineering firms, design firms of all sorts, and trying to broaden that vocabulary. You know, it's hard to understand each other if we don't speak the same language. You know, and letting down our guard of this disciplinary expertise that we all have in our own little zone, and we're an expert in this zone, but we don't want to ask the dumb question when we step out of that zone in front of other people. I do a lot of real estate journal events around the country. You know, 200, 300, 400 real estate pros in the room, and never any questions. Nobody wants to ask a dumb question in front of their peers. So let down our guard, be a little humble, give a little grace, and allow yourself to learn what these things do and how they operate. And I think we can all serve our clients and our community better.
Because none of us have enough to do. Just be aware, you were talking about the time of use rates. Both SPP and MISO, the areas that serve western and eastern Missouri, have said that the next, including this year, but the next 5 to 10 years will have the greatest risk for brownouts and blackouts in our area due to lack of capacity, lack of power. So the idea of time of use is one side of the meter. I think what you're going to see is a huge push for development, but you're also going to see a lot of behind the meter opportunities, whether that be batteries, or whether you see the large industrials take on an opportunity to build something, whatever that may look like. So paying attention to what happens in Jefferson City, both the Public Service Commission, Department of Natural Resources at Jeff City, the legislature, I think will be important. They just passed a huge bill last year. Over the next 9 months, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources is launching a state energy planning process. The new director and the governor are looking to see some tighter direction and some goals. I also think that it'll be more traditional fuels than alternative fuel directed. So keep your eyes out for whatever that means. They want to facilitate the building of power plants because we are at a lack of capacity. They want to figure out what they can do. Part of that process is also a value of solar study, which could then help, even without the tax credit, it could help negotiations and policy development for utilities when customers develop their own solar. So when you think of net metering, are you getting only the lowest cost possible to get paid when you put something back on the grid? Value of solar would allow that conversation to be a little bit more transparent. And I mean, there's a lot of things going on, finding a way to stay connected at different points. I think building the two groups here and everybody on this panel that's in Kansas City, I think are great units to have. But those are going on right now to be aware of.
There's so much going on with Evergy. Yes, the data centers are coming. They're here. Panasonic is up and running. And then meanwhile, Evergy just put their coal plants, finished putting the coal plants through their maintenance. So they actually shut them down and maintain them. And now Wolf Creek is going through its maintenance every 18 months. So they have to produce enough electricity, even just for simple things like that, and then keep the lights on for everybody. And yes, there is more and more building and so forth coming online, but for those of you that are building and stuff, you may know that there is a really long lead time to get your transformers installed to get your building power. So what is the answer? I mean, Evergy, as if you read I have Google send me every article about Evergy. So every morning I've got articles to read. They are looking into the new micronuclear, and there is gas plants that are have been approved. And so now that the federal is drying up, Evergy may look at that because they rely on all of that. They rely on the renewables. They have their own plans in mind, trying to be, carbon neutral, which they still have a ways to go. And I don't know. I haven't heard officially if it's even being, backed up a bit, but. I don't even know if all that even made sense to everybody, but, Evergy is fully aware. They're still committed to be as clean energy as possible and to continue growing with their renewables. It's just still a lot to be done.
Power production is complex. Jonathan and Appy, you want to finish us out here? What's next?
I always encourage anyone, architects, I speak a lot to architects. They tend to want to tour Second or Delaware, which is great. I always ask who knows how to run a basic pro forma, and probably some hands go up, some don't. My encouragement, we're talking about language. There's no way that I'm asking everyone to be an expert in tax planning. So I guess my recommendation would be to find experts that know all about how these tax things work together and hire one of them to build a basic model for you that you understand how it works. And we twist our accountants' arms and say, we want the live model. We're not going to give it to anyone. Or we want a version because we want to be able to understand how these things work. And my brain works best when I can experience something. And so when you see that they were adding dollars for solar, and you think, oh my goodness, I can't afford this. And then you see the tax credits, dollar for dollar or more, pay for it. And then you see your energy bill go down, which means that your debt that you can borrow goes out, and light bulbs start going off, and you start realizing what other operating expenses could we tweak. And so I think real estate finance, it's fourth grade math. There's no calculus, there's not even any algebra. I mean, it's all in Excel. I mean, it's just basically addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. That's it. So I think if we want to really tackle climate change, and we're in an industry that is super capital intensive, and we don't want to be frustrated by having people say, nope, you can't afford to do that. Understand the interplay of these things. It's not as complicated as it seems once you wrap your head around it. And then you'll have this language and this proficiency, and you'll be able to stand up to the person who says, we can't do that. And you can say, you can't afford not to do that. And the anecdotal story I'll give you is when Second and Delaware had paused his way to switch contractors, HUD was very anxious. And if you think about the largest lender in the country breathing down your neck and saying, Jonathan, we know that you care about the environment. We care about this loan being placed in service. So strip out all the green and just get it done. We don't care if you have to build it out of cardboard and bubble gum and tape, just put it in service. And so we actually went out, we got the price to do that. And we looked at what the operating expense increase would be and what our ability to pay back the loan to HUD. And it was worse than if we stayed the course and did passive house. And HUD said, keep going. And that's how. So it's like we lived it personally, do you understand? So yeah, dig into Excel, don't be afraid of numbers, and know enough to be able to speak the language and get things done. It's incredibly empowering.
So I'm fighting my fifth grader right now on learning fractions. Maybe I should just have her go into real estate.
The Land Institute has some great courses like Real Estate Proformas 101, 102. Check out ULI's education offering.
In a weekend. Yeah, one weekend, you'll go and you'll be armed and dangerous. And then do 100 pro formas, over time, and then you'll have your head wrapped.
I'll piggyback off of Jonathan a little bit. So you're awesome. Like, you're the top 1% of our educated developers. But my experience is I'm still meeting people every single day are like, man, I've never even heard of 179D, or I didn't realize that technology was a part of the investment tax credits. So you in this room right now might be the most educated person on your next project. And so I implore you, and I always share with my design teams and my contractors and everybody I partner with, be the person to bring it up. Bring it up on the project if you're not hearing about it, because many of those people might not even know that they exist. You don't have to know everything. If you can bring it up and bring in a trusted partner, that's perfect. And now hopefully can get the ball rolling. Maybe even save all of the green initiatives that you initially had that are now getting written out of the budget because it's just too high. So be that advocate, speak up, share what you know, and just, have people in your corner, just like any of your other sub-consultants who are specialists in that region and can help you. My second piece, if you see it in action and you see it be positive, be an advocate. The most important thing for all of these federal incentives is that they are Republicans or Democrats. Anybody in the House, Senate hears our success stories. Most of them don't know them. Most of them don't know that people are even utilizing them. Most of them don't even really know much about them. They just know they said energy, and that was a strategy for getting it out of the OBBB to save money. So I would say go to USGBC. They have letters that you can sign. Just write letters to your representatives and tell them, hey, these are programs that we really value. They might look a little different, but at least he'll start to hear them and start to advocate on our behalf to bring these back in future legislation.
I don't know if Ben Evans is still on the line or not, but he's definitely clicking his heels regardless. So I want to thank Ben Evans for joining us earlier, and then thank our full panel here: Asia, Jonathan, Monty, Josh, and Dana, and Abby, of course. Thank you for helping us to connect the dots between capital, policy, and community. The ideas and questions from today will shape our next forum, where we'll be turning this chemistry into practice. And I saw quite a few questions come through that we didn't have time to pack into our panel here, but if everyone's willing, we'll be sharing those with you to respond and share out to everybody. So you'll see answers to all of those questions. Thank you again. Thank you for coming today, and thanks for sticking around with us for a couple extra minutes.